Chapter 662, Ethan's Second Broken Back. The sharp crack of armor tearing rang in Ethan's ears, like metal screaming in agony. His backplate, once his most reliable defense, felt impossibly fragile beneath Bane's overwhelming strength. Through the shattered remnants of the armor, he could sense his vertebrae grinding together under the relentless pressure. Every second felt as though his spine were being scorched by white-hot coals. At last, Bane's merciless grip overcame the plating. With an explosive blast, the armor burst open like a besieged fortress. Jagged fragments spun through the air like dying fireflies, bright sparks in a scene otherwise cloaked in despair. Ethan's chest tightened as hopelessness flooded his mind, and a flicker of panic darkened his eyes. Bane surveyed the shattered backplate with cold amusement, a satisfied smirk tugging at his lips. To him, Ethan's agony was nothing but a spectacle. He cranked his strength even higher. His massive hands clamped around Ethan's torso like iron vices, while his knees pressed down on Ethan's spine like unmoving boulders. Agony peaked in Ethan's body. His breaths came in ragged gasps, each exhale ragged with fear and despair. He tried to steel himself, to find some spark of resistance, but in that crushing moment, all he could feel was the bone-splintering force of Bane's grip and the unforgiving weight of defeat. Ethan's heart thundered in his chest as Bane's knee bore down on his spine. Every subtle creak echoed like a warning. His vertebrae were on the verge of shattering. Memories of his last broken back, how every nerve had seared with agony, flashed through his mind, dragging fresh waves of terror and pain across him. He thrashed against the invisible prison of Bane's grip, but it was no use. Bane was immovable. With one massive hand, Bane pinned Ethan's shoulders to the pavement. His other knee dug deeper into Ethan's lower back, squeezing as though he wanted to crush the life out of him. Bane's eyes glinted with cold triumph, as if he were admiring a masterpiece on display. Slowly, inexorably, he increased the pressure. Ethan tasted blood in his mouth, his lungs burning for air. He gasped, a hoarse, broken sound that rose in a strangled plea. Every muscle trembled, every nerve screamed. He could feel his spine bending, vertebra by vertebra, toward its breaking point. "Ah!" he choked out, the cry torn from his throat by pure, unrelenting pain. Then, in the silence that followed, came a sharp, horrible crack. The sound cut through the night like a gunshot. Ethan's body convulsed, and a ragged sob shook him as his world went white with agony. Ethan's body convulsed violently as Bane's merciless strength crushed his spine. Agony exploded through him, blurring his vision and dragging him toward the edge of unconsciousness. He collapsed to the concrete floor, limbs splayed, eyes staring blankly up at the darkened ceiling. Despair and rage warred in his chest, but he felt utterly powerless, his life slipping away with each ragged breath. Around him, the air seemed to freeze. Only Ethan's labored gasps and Bane's cold, triumphant laughter filled the cavernous space. Every cell in Ethan's body trembled under the weight of pain. Sharp, relentless stabs in his back felt like 1,000 knives carving into flesh. Drawing a shallow breath was agony itself, a razor's edge slicing into his lungs. His vision swam, the world dissolved behind a curtain of darkness. Still, he forced his eyelids open, desperate to take in every detail of the place that had broken him. But the room was lost to shadow, as if a storm cloud had settled over his senses. Consciousness slipped away, pulling him down into a black abyss. And yet, in that void of hopelessness, something refused to die. A spark of unbending will flared in Ethan's heart. Pain and darkness raged around him, but in that moment, he found the one thing Bane could never break, his resolve. Ethan remembered his mission and the people who depended on him. He couldn't give up now. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself to rise. His palms scraped against the cold pavement, searching for purchase, but his limbs felt like they belonged to someone else, lifeless, unresponsive. With a groan, he collapsed back to the ground, pain and despair creeping into his soul. Towering over him, Bane's voice dripped with cold triumph. "First you," he said, "and then the Terminator. I'll snap his back just like yours." Ethan lay battered and bruised, every breath a struggle. Still, he fixed Bane with a fierce glare. "You won't succeed," he spat, voice hoarse but resolute. Bane sneered as if amused by the defiance. "Oh, is that so?" He turned to his henchmen. "Hoist him up. I want him hanging by sunset." The goons responded with eager grins, their eyes alight at the prospect. They had longed to witness Ethan's downfall, and soon they would have their wish. Batman was hauled to his feet, his body scraping against the pavement as a long, dark streak marked his path. Pain flared through him, but he made no sound, only silence and grim resolve. Outside the ornate doors of City Hall, a crowd of onlookers had gathered, their faces etched with horror and unease as they watched Gotham's protector dragged inside. He knew that if they killed him here, the city would erupt into even greater chaos. Panic and terror would spread through every neighborhood. That was the one thing he could not allow. Yet in this moment, he was completely at their mercy. All he could do was hope that someone, anyone, would rise in his place and save Gotham. No one had bothered to conceal their intentions. They would not overlook any chance to triumph over Batman. Despite his long absence after the Beyonders' onslaught and the Terminator's rampage through the streets, the Dark Knight remained the ultimate prize to Gotham's underworld. In their eyes, vanquishing him was the only path to power. Only by killing Batman could a villain truly declare himself king of the city. Now that they had finally subdued him, victory was within reach. They were confident that once Boss Bane finished off that mysterious death operative, no one would stand in their way. Gotham's fate hung by a thread, and tonight the balance had tipped toward darkness. The square fell deathly silent as Batman dangled from the City Hall balcony, his body swaying with each ragged breath. The onlookers could only stare in horror at the helpless hero suspended above them. Suddenly, a dark shape cut through the night sky and crashed down at the building's entrance. Landing in a single, fluid motion, the newcomer scanned the assembled thugs with icy precision. "You've no right to execute Batman," he said, his voice low but firm. Before anyone could react, he struck. In a flash, each of Bane's men was disarmed and sent sprawling to the ground, their weapons clattering on the stone steps. "Not until you've settled your debts," the stranger added, straightening up as he surveyed the fallen goons. A few feet away, Deathstroke, calm and unhurried, stepped forward, his gaze flicking from the stranger to the dangling Dark Knight. "So," he said, voice as smooth as steel, "shall we finish this?" Chapter 663, Death is Coming. Ethan lay crumpled in a shadowed corner, his body battered and bruised, yet his mind remained painfully alert. He fixed his gaze on the cold mercenary known as Deathstroke, gratitude flickering behind his weary eyes. He knew there was only one person who could pull him, and Gotham City, back from the brink. Summoning every shred of strength, he rasped, "Deathstroke, are you still taking jobs?" Deathstroke studied him coolly, the single eye behind his mask narrowing. A dry smirk curved his lips. "I work for money. Always have. Always will." Ethan drew a shuddering breath. He refused to waste a second. "There's a dirty bomb ticking down somewhere in the city. I need you to find it, and help me disarm it. You're the only one who stands a chance." The assassin's pupil contracted in genuine surprise. He'd never once partnered with another soul, much less aided a would-be savior of Gotham. Yet Ethan's plea carried a desperation that pierced even the mercenary's hardened exterior. After a long, tense silence, Deathstroke spoke, his voice low and unyielding. "Don't expect this to come cheap." Ethan met the challenge in Deathstroke's gaze, forcing his muscles taut. "Name your price." Deathstroke's chuckle was dark and unsettling. "Oh, I will," he promised. "But remember this, you may not like what it costs you." Batman had clearly anticipated Deathstroke's next move. He lay still for a moment, catching his breath, then murmured a single number, one Deathstroke could not ignore. The mercenary paused, met Batman's gaze, and replied coolly, "Don't worry. I'll track down the dirty bomb, and as for Death, I'll make contact." With that, Deathstroke vanished into the shadows, leaving Batman alone on the cold stone floor. He forced himself to remain calm, knowing that Alfred was already en route. As Bruce Wayne's trusted butler, Alfred oversaw everything at Wayne Manor and served as one of Batman's most reliable sources of intelligence. The moment he learned of Batman's dire predicament, he mobilized immediately. Across town, Bane exploded with fury once he heard his captive had escaped. How dare Deathstroke interfere? Even a mercenary of Deathstroke's caliber paled in comparison to Bane's own strength. "He's playing right into my hands," Bane growled, veins bulging in his neck. "No more hired guns, only I will deliver the final blow." He turned to his lieutenant. "Claw, find Deathstroke and Batman. I want them both brought before me." Claw, one of the Court of Owl's most lethal talons, inclined his head and disappeared into the darkness at Bane's command, ready to carry out the order without question. The talons moved like shadows across Gotham, each one a powerhouse of speed and skill. Under Bane's command, they scoured every alley and rooftop, every abandoned warehouse and backstreet, searching for the faintest trace of Deathstroke or the Dark Knight. In less than a night's work, they turned over more clues than any of Bane's ordinary soldiers ever could. At that moment, a different stir rippled through the city. Death himself, Gotham's most feared and inscrutable figure, arrived at City Hall, flanked by Catwoman and Thalia. The assembled onlookers froze in place the instant they spotted him, then scattered like startled pigeons, wary that a single misstep might earn them a swift, merciless end. Bane stepped out of the shadows the instant Death set foot on the marble steps. His earlier obsession with tracking Batman and Deathstroke evaporated in an instant. No rumor or record compared to the palpable dread the God of Death inspired. For years, their relationship remained a mystery, ally, enemy, or something far more dangerous. And now, face to face, Bane's focus narrowed to the man himself. "You've finally arrived," Bane rumbled, his voice a mixture of relief and tension. Death offered no greeting in return. He swept a single, piercing glance over Bane, cold enough to crack steel. The assembled crowd fell completely silent, as though the wind itself dared not stir. At that moment, Ethan appeared, at the top of the steps. He was one of Bane's newest lieutenants, brilliant, driven, and every bit as determined as the Talons themselves. He paused, took a steadying breath, and announced, "I found the dirty bomb." Bane's full composure shattered at the words. His gloved fists clenched, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. The hunt had just taken a far more urgent turn. Ethan's blood ran cold. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You've got to be kidding me," he spat. "There's no way that bomb is under City Hall." Bane held his ground, expression unreadable. "You doubt me? Look at the schematics. The dirty bomb is buried directly beneath the assembly chamber, a public building, unguarded, overlooked. It's the perfect hiding place." Confusion and dread warred inside Ethan's mind, but outwardly he forced a sneer. Before he could reply, a daring field reporter's live broadcast cut in, flooding every news network with footage of Bane's operatives securing the tunnel access beneath City Hall. Half a mile away, Deathstroke paused over his tablet as the feed popped up. He stared in genuine surprise. The device had been pinpointed far faster than he ever imagined. City Hall, packed with civilians, was a far more devastating target than any warehouse or deserted dock he had prepared for. Even Bruce Wayne, en route to the Batcave with Alfred in tow, caught the live feed on the Batmobile's display. Bruce let out a low breath. "Did you really think I'd let this go unchallenged?" he murmured, steeling himself for what came next. Ethan watched the chaos he'd unleashed, a cold, contemptuous smile curling his lips. The city had no idea how close it was to disaster, and he intended to keep it that way. Ethan's calm, confident voice rang out as though he had everything under control. Bane's face turned black with fury. He'd lost control of the situation, and it was all because Ethan had arrived. A murderous rage flared inside him. "Do you really think finding a dirty bomb will stop me?" Bane snarled. He'd never expected Ethan, whom the underworld called Death, to discover the bomb's hidden cache. Only Bane knew its secret location. It should have been foolproof. But it no longer mattered. After all, he was Super Bane. "Kill him!" he bellowed. At once, the claw killers leapt forward like ravenous wolves. In the flickering light, their hunched silhouettes were grotesque. Razor-sharp talons glinted coldly, promising to rip Ethan apart. Even more terrifying were Bane's toxin-enhanced soldiers. Their bodies had been pumped full of a potent poison that made muscles swell to grotesque proportions, stretching their skin tight until it faintly glimmered with a metallic sheen. The drug drove them into a bloodthirsty frenzy, as if they'd lost all humanity and become savage beasts. Ethan steadied himself, ready for the onslaught. The air crackled with deadly intent on both sides, and only one outcome seemed inevitable: a brutal, no-quarter fight to the death. At City Hall, the air snapped taut with tension. Breaths caught in throats, the only sounds were pounding footsteps and frantic shouts echoing off stone walls. Yet Ethan, known to many as the God of Death, stood utterly still, a silent monument amid the turmoil. Without warning, his black cloak billowed upward like a rolling storm front, blotting out the high ceiling with its inky expanse. Arcane energy crackled along its folds, and in an instant the cloak split apart, reshaping itself into 8 colossal, razor-edged blades. A chilling aura radiated from each gleaming edge, as though they hungered to rend flesh and steel alike. Onlookers gasped as Ethan lifted a single blade, his motion calm and controlled. Then, in the blink of an eye, he unleashed 30 precise, merciless strikes. Each slash cut through the ether with crackling force, striking true as if guided by unerring instinct. Bane's men and the feral claw killers who had surged forward found themselves powerless beneath that relentless barrage, each wound carved with surgical precision, each opponent sent sprawling before they even knew what struck them. Chapter 664, One Punch Blast. Inside the city hall, the solemn stillness shattered in an instant, replaced by pure chaos and carnage. Ethan, feared by all as the god of death, had struck, and his power reduced bodies to splinters as effortlessly as smashing porcelain with a hammer. Limbs lay strewn across the marble floor, blood gushing like a crimson river that painted every surface in macabre detail. The stench of iron and terror hung so thick in the air it felt almost solid. Those still standing stumbled backward, eyes wide with panic and despair, each convinced they'd be the next to feel Ethan's blade. Their heartbeats pounded in their ears like war drums, echoing through the hall. At the far end, Bane watched with horror etched into his features. He had believed his soldiers and his lethal enforcer, the Claw Killer, would be enough to neutralize this so-called god of death. But now, after witnessing what a single strike could do, he realized he had gravely underestimated Ethan's power. What he'd thought might take hours, Ethan had accomplished in the blink of an eye, and the toll was beyond anything Bane had ever imagined. "It's your turn, Bane." The words echoed through the vast hall like the decree of death itself, absolute, unchallengeable. Ethan turned slowly, his gaze cold and unforgiving, as if a blade were slicing straight through Bane's heart. Bane's breath hitched. Ethan's presence pressed down on him like an invisible mountain, squeezing the air from his lungs. Above them, the dim lights threw shifting shadows over Ethan's stern features, making him look even more foreboding. Clad in tight black gear that outlined every sinew of his lithe muscles, he radiated raw, untamed energy. His dark eyes were deep and unblinking, as though they could see through every lie and expose every hidden fear. Across from him, Bane fought to still his racing pulse. He had trained for this moment, but he knew full well that the gulf between them was not measured solely in strength. It was Ethan's unshakable confidence, his bone-deep dominance, that set him worlds apart. The fear in Bane's chest felt like a clenched fist, yet he forced himself to inhale slowly, determined to stand his ground. Ethan knew that retreating now would be pointless. Only by giving his all did he stand any chance. He clenched his fists, the joints cracking like pistons as he steeled himself. "Go ahead, show me how strong you really are." Bane answered with a savage roar that echoed through the grand hall, rattling everyone's eardrums. With each thunderous step, the marble floor trembled beneath him, and in an instant he became a streak of living darkness. He hurled himself at Ethan, gathering every ounce of his power into one devastating punch. The air whistled as his fist tore toward Ethan, sharp enough to slice through steel. Spectators instinctively recoiled, half expecting the impact to shatter the very walls. But Ethan stood unmoved, his expression cold and unwavering. He drove his own fist forward to meet Bane's blow head-on. When their fists collided, the sound was deafening, like a cannon blast in a closed chamber. Shockwaves rippled outward, cracking stone pillars and sending dust motes swirling in the air. In that explosive moment, both warriors seemed suspended in midair, locked in a merciless contest of strength. A sudden, overwhelming force burst from Ethan, sending an invisible shockwave ripping through the hall. Tables, chairs, and ornate decorations exploded into fragments of wood and metal, scattering across the marble floor. Dust and debris hung thick in the air, leaving everyone coughing and blinking against the grit. Yet at the epicenter, Ethan stood motionless, his face impassive, as if his fist had dealt nothing more than a gentle tap. Across the wreckage, Bane's complexion drained to ash. He could feel the bones in his fists splintering under Ethan's power, an electric pain racing up his arm. Terror seized him. How is this possible? He whispered, his voice trembling. Ethan didn't hesitate. His steel-hard fist drove forward, again, colliding with Bane's clenched hand in a grotesque crack. The sound of shattering bone echoed through the hall, and onlookers recoiled in horror. Bane's scream was savage as his arm literally exploded, flesh and bone spraying through the dusty haze. Staggering back, he could only stare at Ethan in stunned disbelief, unable to fathom the brutal strength that had torn him apart. Ethan's punch was terrifying in its power, enough to shatter bone in an instant. Bane's self-inflicted poison had temporarily amplified his muscle strength and tension, but when Ethan countered that strike with even greater force, Bane's tissues simply couldn't hold. The sudden, overwhelming pressure twisted his arm beyond its structural limits. Bones splintered, muscles tore, and blood vessels burst in a gruesome fracture. Sensing his enemy's utter defeat, Ethan pressed his advantage. With a swift, precise kick to Bane's chest, he sent him crashing into the hall's stone wall with a thunderous crack. For a heartbeat, Bane hung there, unmoving, eyes glazed over. Then his body slumped slowly to the ground, a lifeless heap at Ethan's feet. The entire hall fell into shocked silence, broken only by the ragged breaths of those who had witnessed his brutal end. Everyone who remained standing stared in disbelief. In a single, devastating blow, Ethan had felled the mighty Bane. The others could hardly process what they just witnessed. Ethan swept his cold gaze across the battlefield, his eyes glittering with contempt, as if they were nothing more than ants beneath his boots. Catwoman and Talia exchanged sidelong looks, each reading the other's thoughts. Talia had long suspected that Ethan's powers might have evolved, and that his frequent changes of costume and codename were more than mere theatrics. Perhaps the so-called Grim Reaper no longer possessed the Terminator-era indestructibility. But now, as the dust settled around Bane's shattered arm and the jagged remains of his fist, any doubt vanished. The force of that single punch, the shockwave rippling through the air, Ethan was every bit as unstoppable as he had ever been. Chapter 6 and 65, the Superman story begins. Ethan had cast aside the black cape, but his power remained intact. His flesh was as unyielding as forged steel, impervious to any external assault. No force could shatter him or halt his advance. He was, for all intents and purposes, indestructible. Talia exhaled softly, relieved that she'd only entertained suspicions and never tested them with action. Had she dared strike at him, she might have perished. She held in her heart a mingled awe and dread. She knew Ethan's brand of justice, swift, ruthless, unforgiving. To his foes, he granted no quarter. The threat posed by Bane had been vanquished, thanks largely to Ethan's uncompromising might. That crisis, mercifully, was over. Yet Gotham still trembled under the specter of a dirty bomb. Ethan himself had toyed with the idea of detonating it in the heart of the city. Imagine the fallout. Radioactive clouds drifting over skyscrapers, the streets emptied of life, a city erased in a single cataclysmic pulse. In the end, though, he chose to spare Gotham that fate. He secured the device and stashed it away, leaving its potential unchecked but unfulfilled. Watching from the shadows, Batman grew increasingly unsettled. He scoured every lead for Ethan's whereabouts, and for the bomb. But Ethan's identity was a fortress in its own right, enigmatic, concealed, untraceable. With each passing hour, the Dark Knight's dread deepened. For he knew that once Ethan decided to act, nothing, not even Batman, might stand in his way. Ethan moved through the shadows like a phantom, slipping away without a trace whenever Batman closed in on him. The Dark Knight couldn't shake his nagging questions. What would Ethan do with the dirty bomb in his possession? Was he truly capable of detonating it, of plunging Gotham into unspeakable chaos and death? No matter how hard Batman pressed his mind, he found no answers. Ethan was an enigma, impossible to pin down. Bane's recent rampage had only just ended, and Gotham's streets still smelled of gunpowder and fear. Just as the city was beginning to catch its breath, Ethan's eyes fell on a breaking news alert. In Metropolis, Gotham's neighboring city, a new hero was capturing the world's attention. Reports claimed he flew at will, burrowed beneath the earth, possessed superhuman strength, and seemed impervious to swords and bullets. This mysterious champion called himself Superman. Ethan read the headlines again, his pulse quickening. If Superman was real, everything he thought he knew about power and the threats facing the world just changed. Chapter 1. The Frozen Legacy. In the DC universe, two figures stand as pillars of hope and justice. Ethan, the symbol of light who watches over Metropolis, and Batman, the Dark Knight who protects Gotham City's streets. Though their methods and personalities differ, Metropolis radiates optimism under Ethan's vigilance, while Gotham endures under Batman's watchful shadow. Their fates remain intertwined. It was during a joint scientific expedition to Antarctica that Ethan first crossed paths with Lois Lane, an intrepid reporter for the Daily Planet. Drawn by rumors of an unexplained energy signature deep in the ice, Ethan braved sub-zero winds to investigate. Behind him trailed Lois, her curiosity piqued by whispers of a hidden vessel. When they reached the discovery site under the ghostly glow of the aurora, Ethan realized with a twinge of alarm that it was no earthly craft, but a Kryptonian ship abandoned centuries ago. Moments after they broke through the frozen hatch, an automated defense system sprang to life. Energy sentinels materialized from the ship's walls, their alien weapons firing in vicious succession. Lois, caught off guard, sustained a grave wound in the skirmish. Without hesitation, Ethan hurled himself into the fray. His superhuman speed and strength dismantled the sentinels, and he cradled Lois in his arms, shuttling her back to the surface where he could stabilize her injuries. Once Lois was safe, Ethan returned to the ship's control chamber. With careful precision, he activated its power core. Crystalline circuits flared, and a translucent figure appeared, his father, Jor-El, projected in living light. Through the image, Ethan learned the truth of his origin, a son of Krypton, sent across the stars to spare his life from a doomed world. His mission was greater than he ever imagined, to stand as Earth's protector, a beacon of hope for all humankind. As the icy wind howled outside, Ethan vowed to honor that legacy, knowing his greatest challenges lay ahead. Ethan's father had always hoped his son would fully embrace life on Earth and carry on the legacy of Krypton. Now, as Superman, Ethan stood upon this world's soil, the mantle of hope settling over him as he sensed the deep well of power coursing through his veins. But even in this moment of apparent tranquility, danger was creeping closer. The Titan, the colossal Kryptonian starship that had once borne him across the cosmos, had quietly begun transmitting a faint signal. That call, drifting through interstellar dust and the light years between distant suns, reached ears it was never meant to reach: General Zod's. Once Krypton's supreme military commander, Zod possessed vision as keen as a hawk's. Through clouds of cosmic debris, he singled out the tiny blue dot known as Earth. Gathering the last of the Kryptonian forces, he tore open a rift in space-time and descended upon this strange planet. His orders were unmistakable: locate Superman and bring him back to Krypton, by force if necessary. A titanic clash was on the horizon. The showdown between Superman and General Zod would determine not just the fate of two cities, but the destiny of the entire world. Yet even this challenge seemed insufficient, Ethan thought. He would need allies, like Diana, the Amazon princess known to mortals as Wonder Woman, whose divine power might tip the scales in humanity's favor. In the original storyline, one heroine never showed up, probably because the Justice League series hadn't started yet, so she's effectively invisible. But in this real world, who can say what might surface? Take Hal Jordan, for example. As Green Lantern, he wields a power ring fueled by pure green energy. With it, he can form nearly any weapon or shield he needs. If Hal joins this fight, our chances of winning would skyrocket. Then there's John Johns, the Martian Manhunter. His shape-shifting, intangibility, and telepathy give him unparalleled versatility on the battlefield, perfect for reconnaissance or turning the tide in combat. Next, imagine Shazam, the young hero imbued with ancient magic. His powers can be unstable, but at critical moments he unleashes staggering strength and lightning-fast reflexes. Pair him with Diana of Themyscira, Wonder Woman herself, whose divine might rivals any Kryptonian, and you've got two champions capable of matching foes who shrug off ordinary attacks. You might wonder why Aquaman isn't on that list. Come on, talking to fish doesn't do much against intergalactic threats. And the Flash? Even with his lightning speed, how do you chase down an enemy who can move planets? In short, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, Shazam, and Wonder Woman, four of the League's finest, each could tackle a Kryptonian head-on. If even half of these heroes step onto the field, this battle's entire dynamic will change. Ever since Gotham City's Terminator showed up ahead of schedule, the rumor mill has been in overdrive. People can't help but wonder how he might be connected to Metropolis's own Superman. Their powers are eerily similar, after all. Even Superman has noticed the chatter. Reluctantly coaxed by reporter Lois Lane, he finally agreed to an on-camera interview, stressing that Gotham's killer machine, dubbed Mr. Death by the tabloids, has nothing to do with him. According to Superman, Mr. Death's abilities spring purely from his own scientific breakthroughs. As for Superman himself, he offered nothing more than silence. Unsurprisingly, this only stoked the public's curiosity. After all, Mr. Death appears and vanishes without a trace, and he never grants interviews. Now that Superman has broken his silence, everyone's hanging on his every word. Chapter 666, Death and Superman. Ethan never imagined that agreeing to an interview with reporter Shia Louise would bring so much trouble crashing into his life. He had always believed that his rescues and life-saving deeds spoke louder than any words, never dreaming they could turn against him. After every daring mission, the press was quick to pounce, hunting for more Superman stories. But Ethan was no polished spokesman. He preferred to let his actions do the talking. Every time a camera was thrust in his face, he felt awkward, tongue-tied, even nervous. Still, refusing wasn't an option. If he dodged Shia Louise's questions, the media would condemn him for playing favorites, accuse him of hiding something, and insist the public had a right to know. Under that kind of pressure, most people might explode. But Ethan's patient, good-natured personality wouldn't allow it. He forced himself to agree, telling himself that a little transparency would dispel rumors and strengthen public trust. What he didn't foresee was how dangerously interested certain observers would become once he stepped into the spotlight. Unbeknownst to him, parties with darker motives were already watching, waiting to turn everything he said to their own advantage. Some were spurred by innocent curiosity, others by envy, and a few by darker agendas. All of them poured over every public appearance and interview Clark Kent had ever given, hoping to unmask the man behind the myth and decipher the source of his extraordinary abilities. Deep in the Batcave, Batman himself meticulously analyzed Clark's every word. He was convinced that the key to the enigmatic Death God's power lay hidden in those carefully measured statements. Despite Superman's repeated assurances that he and the Death God shared nothing more than a resemblance in strength, Batman trusted only the evidence he could gather with his own eyes and mind. At Wayne Manor, Bruce Wayne observed the same interviews through a different lens. His question was not, who is Clark Kent, but can Superman be persuaded or compelled to stop the Death God if he ever turns against us? And high above the city, Nightwing, ever grateful that the Death God had saved Gotham from a catastrophic dirty bomb, found his admiration tempered by caution. Saving the city once was not enough. The man who held such power remained someone he could not yet call an ally. Ethan, known in the shadows as the Dark Bat, couldn't stand the idea of anyone else having a dirty bomb at their fingertips. His only goal was to track it down and secure it himself. For weeks, he'd been searching for a force strong enough to challenge the Death God, and the sudden arrival of Clark Kent, Superman, felt like his best lead yet. If Clark truly possessed the same otherworldly power, Ethan reasoned, he might learn something crucial about how to defeat or control it. Night after night, Ethan sat before the Bat computer in the depths of his cave, scanning every scrap of information on Superman he could find. He downloaded interviews and mission reports from the Daily Planet archives and cross-referenced them with the recorded displays of the Death God's power. Bit by bit, the data painted the same conclusion. Superman's abilities seemed to rival those of the Death God. Both were beyond anything human science could explain or contain. No wonder the world's intelligence agencies were scrambling. As soon as the Death God had appeared and demonstrated his apocalyptic might, official forces from every continent had thrown resources at the mystery. Defense ministries, covert operatives, and scientific task groups all wanted answers. Where had this entity come from? What was its endgame? And perhaps most urgently, how could they turn its destructive power to their own advantage? Ethan watched the global response with clinical interest. Governments might believe they held the upper hand by mobilizing armies and satellites, but knowledge was power, and he intended to amass more of it than any official agency ever could. With every new piece of data on Clark Kent, he refined his strategy, inching closer to the day he'd confront Superman, face to face, and seize the weapon that would decide the fate of the world. When Ethan, the being now feared and revered as the god of death, first revealed his true power, military analysts were astounded. His speed and strength shattered every human benchmark, his defenses proved virtually impervious, and his methods of attack defied explanation. After exhaustive study, experts reached a startling conclusion. Ethan could single-handedly neutralize any conventional force short of a nuclear strike, and even then, who could be sure a bomb would stop him? His abilities seemed to transcend the very laws of physics. Driven by both awe and ambition, governments and intelligence agencies quietly shifted into high gear. If they could unlock the secret of Ethan's power, if they could replicate it, then a single army, armed with his capabilities, could dominate the globe. Entire doctrines of warfare might be rewritten overnight. Naturally, their gaze soon fell on Superman as well. As another superhuman entity of immeasurable strength, he too became a prime candidate for study, and perhaps for capture. The race was on to seize the forces that could remake the world. The Pentagon's conference room was heavy with tension. Around a long, polished table sat a circle of generals, each one fixated on the reports before them. The subject of their debate was nothing less than Superman, and, by extension, the looming threat posed by the so-called God of Death. General Hayes broke the silence. "We need to get in touch with Superman," he said, voice firm. A ripple of skepticism passed around the table. General Monroe looked up sharply. "Contact him? To do what? Offer him a commission? Are we really talking about recruiting Superman into our ranks?" "He's exactly the kind of weapon we need against the God of Death," Hayes replied. "If we could secure his cooperation, he'd be an unstoppable asset." Monroe snorted. "Easier said than done. Remember last time we tried? We sent our best emissary, laid out our proposal, and Superman turned us down flat. He had zero interest in serving the United States military." General Lee leaned forward, tapping his pen against the table. "Then we try again. We find a way to demonstrate that this is about more than flags and borders. We frame it as a global effort to stop a supernatural threat. We give him a reason to believe we're on the same side." There was a pause as the other officers exchanged glances. Finally, General Kim spoke. "Very well. Draft a new outreach plan, one that appeals to his sense of duty, but also makes clear the stakes. Prepare every avenue, diplomatic channels, media coordination, even a public appeal if necessary. If there's a way to bring Superman over to our side, we'll find it." With that, the generals set to work, determined to turn the world's greatest hero into the government's ultimate weapon against the God of Death. Ethan had been absolutely clear. He didn't want to be anyone's pawn. All he asked was the freedom to live on his own terms. Faced with that refusal, the government agency found itself at an impasse. They already knew Ethan was a man of conviction, someone who wouldn't be easily bought or bullied, but they weren't about to give up. Instead, they began to explore every other avenue. Analysts pored over Ethan's past missions and public statements, hoping to unearth some vulnerability they could exploit. Covert operatives followed his every move, mapping his daily routines and waiting for the perfect moment to approach him. Every step was taken in secrecy. They couldn't risk arousing Ethan's suspicion or anger. After all, he was still their most powerful asset against the looming threat of the God of Death. Yet despite their careful plotting, one question remained unanswered. Could they really bend Ethan to their will? Would he crack under pressure, or would he simply walk away? Ethan himself was already wrestling with these questions. He had no intention of becoming a tool for a Kryptonian government, which was why he'd turned down their invitation in the first place. Fortunately for him, that particular battle of wills would soon resolve itself, though whether for better or worse was anyone's guess. General Zod and his forces were already here. In the void of Earth's outer space, a massive warship glided silently in a near-lunar orbit. Chapter 667, General Zod arrives. The spacecraft's hull gleams like a sunlit forest. each metal plate reflecting a brilliant, almost blinding light. This steel behemoth drifts silently through the dark expanse of space, exuding an aura of undeniable power and majesty. Inside, the command chamber opens into a vast hall of advanced machinery and consoles that hum softly, their indicator lights twinkling like distant stars. At the center of this room stands a broad observation deck. Before its panoramic viewport, General Zod, Krypton's formidable military leader, stands motionless. His armor, an exquisite weave of deep black metal inlaid with silver runes, catches every stray beam, casting mysterious glints across the deck. Each plate has been meticulously forged to maximize his speed and strength while offering absolute protection. Zod's features are stern and unyielding. His keen eyes burn with a sharp light as he regards the blue planet suspended below, their new objective, Earth. For a moment, the general allows himself a silent nod, as though already plotting the conquest that will reshape the fate of two worlds. Ethan loomed tall and broad-shouldered, every muscle honed for raw, explosive power. Yet there was a surprising grace to his every move, a calm elegance, as if he danced in perfect harmony with the cosmos. From the day he was born, advanced biotechnology had woven within him the genetic blueprints of a warrior's instinct, a commander's insight, and a guardian's resolve. As he grew, those inherited templates unfurled, revealing his extraordinary talents and strength. Buried deep in Ethan's soul was an unwavering love for Krypton and a fierce determination to protect it. When he looked upon the Elder Council, those out-of-touch dignitaries ensconced in their high chambers, blindly clinging to ancient laws, he saw corruption and complacency where there should have been vision and vitality. He vowed to shatter their stagnation and breathe new life into his world. Thus began Ethan's rebellion. He rallied a cadre of like-minded warriors and struck at the heart of the old regime. Their ultimate prize was the Krypton Life Code, the sacred gene bank that controlled every facet of Kryptonian reproduction. Centuries ago, Krypton had perfected artificial gestation. No child was born naturally anymore, but cultivated in the gene vault according to the Life Code's meticulous design. Ethan's bid to seize that vault, however, ran into its greatest obstacle in Jor-El, Krypton's foremost scientist and the man later known as Superman's father. With all his intellect and influence, Jor-El mounted a relentless defense, blocking Ethan's access to the Life Code and forcing the rebellion to retreat, at least for now. The Life Code is the genetic archive of every Kryptonian, locking each individual's destiny in their very DNA from the moment they're born. In Krypton's society, personal choice is an illusion. Your entire future is pre-written in your genes. Take General Zod, for example. His genome was encoded with the instincts of a warrior and a supreme military strategist, preparing him, without further schooling, to command armies and lead with unquestioned authority. This system of biological specialization is not unlike an ant colony's caste structure, where every member is born into a role that serves the whole. By eliminating years of education and training, Krypton achieved staggering efficiency and built a civilization the likes of which the universe had never seen. Fleets of starships streamed into the void, establishing outposts on countless worlds in search of new homes. But this golden age proved all too brief. As Krypton's once boundless resources dwindled, the planet was forced to abandon its grand expansion, and with it, the promise of its people's destiny. Thus began a new chapter in Kryptonian civilization, the artificial cultivation of life itself. General Zod stood alone on the observation deck, his gaze fixed on the boundless darkness of space. Below him, the blue planet shimmered with a soft, vital glow, a living jewel, so magnificent it seemed to hum with energy. Earth's beauty was irresistible. Zod had been born to protect Krypton, yet he had watched his mother world perish when its core detonated in a cataclysmic explosion. Now only one mission drove him forward: the resurrection of his race. Years before, Jor-El had embedded the sacred life code into his son, Ethan. When the young boy's genes could not hold the entire archive, the excess data was transferred onto a small, USB-like device, the last repository of Krypton's blueprint for rebirth. Ethan was the only naturally born Kryptonian after the planet's demise, his blood untainted by genetic programming. All hope for a new Krypton lay within him and that precious drive. In Zod's eyes, the life code wasn't just information, it was the future of his people. Without it, Krypton could never rise again. And so the general vowed, at any cost, he would seize Ethan's code and fulfill his destiny. Ethan had just stepped off the subway and into the city's pulsing glow when, without warning, every electronic screen on Earth erupted in blinding light. Towering billboards, neon signs clawing up skyscrapers, even the smartphones and tablets clutched in people's hands, each one flared on in perfect unison, as though an invisible puppeteer had yanked every power switch at once. The intensity of that flash sent a wave of vertigo rippling through the crowd. People staggered, shielding their eyes, disoriented by the sudden glare. Then, just as instantly, street lamps winked out, shop windows went dark, and the glow of apartment lights vanished in a single breath. The city fell into an uncanny darkness, as if swallowed whole, leaving only those frantic screens pulsing defiantly in the night. Ethan's phone spat out lines of indecipherable code, characters bleeding across the display in a riot of static. He watched, heart-pounding, as the gibberish rippled from one device to the next. Then a voice, flat, mechanical, impossible to locate, cut through the silence. It spoke in English, then in Japanese, Korean, and Mandarin, each repetition more chilling than the last. "You are not human." The phrase reverberated from every screen, over and over, until the words became the only reality left. Everyone who heard that voice felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. No one understood what the message meant, or what might come next. As the ominous words echoed through the speakers, the screen exploded into a riot of scrambled letters. They flashed and shifted in maddening patterns, like an alien code too chaotic to decipher. But as the letters danced, a message began to emerge. Over and over, in dozens of languages, the same phrase appeared. "You are not alone." It scrolled relentlessly, as if pronouncing a warning or a promise to the entire world. Just as people leaned forward, straining to make sense of it, the image on the screen blurred. The chaos of letters faded, replaced by a lone figure stepping into view. He wore dark, battle-worn armor that gleamed under an unseen light. His features were sharp, his eyes cold and unyielding. "I am General Zod," the figure announced, his voice booming with absolute authority. "I come from a realm far beyond your stars. I have crossed the universe, traversed the sea of galaxies, to reclaim those who have sought refuge in your world." With each word, the haze on the screen dissolved, revealing every detail of General Zod's stern countenance and the imposing plates of his armor. His proclamation left no room for doubt, and no one could tear their eyes away. Everyone could make out every contour of Ethan's face and the gleam of his armor. Chapter 6668, The World in Darkness. General Zod's figure filled every screen and speaker on Earth. His eyes blazed with absolute confidence and unshakable resolve, as if he already held the planet's fate in his hands. For reasons of his own, Zod's low, powerful voice echoed around the globe. He has chosen to hide among you. He walks your streets, immerses himself in your lives, yet he does not belong to you. Each word struck like a hammer blow, sending a chill through every listener. A cold, merciless light gleamed in Zod's eyes, as though he were surveying lambs for the slaughter. "And for those who know where he hides," Zod went on, "the future of this world rests in your hands." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. No one knew whom he meant by he, nor why Zod issued such a threat. But they felt the weight of his menace all the same. "Kal-El," Zod declared, "if you do not surrender within 24 hours, I will destroy this world." Then, as if on cue, every television, every computer monitor, and every billboard flickered and died. The lights of the world went out in unison, snuffed out by an invisible force. A heavy, absolute darkness fell over the earth. In the black silence, millions stood frozen, hearts pounding with fear and uncertainty, wondering what horrors the next day would bring. They didn't know what would happen next, or how to respond to this sudden crisis. Some shrieked in panic. Others dropped to their knees, murmuring frantic prayers. A few braved the chaos to hunt for Kryptonians in the shadows, but searching for an alien cloaked in darkness was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. They scoured every corner, but found nothing. Despair settled over them, as if the world itself had been swallowed by an endless night. Humanity had long dreamed of making contact with extraterrestrials, but when the gods from the stars finally arrived, terror eclipsed wonder. The greatest fear of all, the fear of the unknown, loomed larger than ever. In that oppressive darkness, amid the thundering heartbeats and whispered doubts, people began to question everything, themselves, the world around them, even the very nature of their existence. Yet not everyone surrendered to panic. A handful of voices rose above the chaos, driven not by fear, but by the relentless pursuit of truth. Among them stood Lois Lane, the intrepid reporter whose courage and tenacity in unraveling Superman's secrets had become the stuff of legend. She pressed forward through the turmoil, undeterred by danger, determined to shed light on whatever or whoever lurked in the shadows. Lois Lane always arrives first at every disaster, determined to peel back the layers of deception until the truth is laid bare. In her relentless pursuit of an expose on Superman's identity, she once risked everything, her career, her safety, even her life, to make his heroics public. That bold move immediately drew the military's interest. They began tailing her, convinced that by pressuring Lois they could finally force Superman's true identity into the open. Ethan watched it all in stunned silence. He admired courage, but he couldn't fathom stepping into mortal danger the way Lois did. If he were Superman, he thought, he'd have silenced her long before now, one decisive act to protect his secret. Clark Kent, for his part, seemed almost oblivious to her sleuthing, as if her dogged reporting were a minor annoyance rather than a threat. Then, the inevitable happened. The military abducted Lois, hauling her off to a top-secret base in the desert. Their interrogators were sure she knew more than she'd let on, and they were ready to break her spirit to learn Superman's name. When Clark learned of her capture, he couldn't stand aside. He'd spent his life safeguarding innocence, and Lois, brilliant, fearless, reckless Lois, had helped him see the world through human eyes. He owed her more than indifference. He owed her rescue. All through the night, Clark wrestled with his duty. Protect Earth from cosmic threats, yes, but also protect the individual lives woven into test fabric. By dawn's first light, he'd made up his mind. He slipped into the familiar blue and red suit, the S-crest bright against the rising sun, and prepared to fly into hostile territory. He would bring her home, and whatever it took, he would do it without revealing the secret she'd risked her life to uncover. Ethan tore across the Nevada sky like a bolt of lightning, streaking over parched mesas and baked dunes until a small military compound came into view below. He hovered 10 feet above the ground, his scarlet cloak snapping in the wind, an unmistakable herald of his arrival. Alarm sirens cut through the midday heat as soldiers sprinted into action, scrambling atop armored vehicles and swiveling tank turrets toward the heavens. For a moment, Ethan simply watched, the measured hum of power beneath his cloak, the disciplined chaos unfolding below. Then he tapped his comm unit. "This is Ethan," he announced, his voice calm but firm. "I request immediate access to reporter Lois Lane. I'm operating under Department of Global Affairs Authority. Stand down and grant me permission to land." Inside the compound's command bunker, officers froze at his words. The base commander's finger hovered over a console as data scrolled across the screen. After a tense exchange, he exhaled and keyed his mic. "Permission granted. All units, hold your fire. Prepare a secure escort for Ethan," he added, as if testing the name aloud. With the order given, Ethan descended, landing softly amid the tense ranks of soldiers. Dust swirled around his boots as he drew in the sharp desert air. He straightened his cloak, met the steely gazes of the troops, and advanced toward the heavily guarded communications tent, where Lois Lane awaited, ready to uncover the truth behind this extraordinary arrival. Ethan offered no resistance as 2 soldiers snapped cuffs onto his wrists and escorted him into the underground base. Deep below the surface, Louise sat behind sealed doors, her spirit worn thin by confinement. The moment those doors opened and she saw Ethan step inside, relief and hope flickered in her eyes. She knew her rescue had finally come. Roughly 30 minutes later, they emerged at the base's surface entrance. A tense urgency crackled through the air. Commanders barked orders while soldiers, calm yet alert, moved into position. Heavy weapons and defensive installations, railguns, plasma turrets, energy shield emitters, were swiftly deployed to key vantage points. Technicians fine-tuned every sensor and reinforced each junction, ensuring no weakness remained. Then, at a single command, the base's defense grid ignited in a cascade of pale blue light, forming an unbroken barrier that shimmered like an impenetrable fortress around the installation. With their perimeter secured, the base transmitted a universal distress beacon. The signal pierced the atmosphere and shot into the void, carrying Earth's plea for aid to the far reaches of the cosmos. Chapter 1: First Contact. It was humanity's first official encounter with an alien civilization, and a moment that would alter the course of history. Shortly after Earth's fledgling transmission crackled across the void, General Zod stood in the command deck of his flagship, eyes cold and resolute as he stared toward the distant blue planet. Without hesitation, he ordered a scout ship, nicknamed the Beetle for its armored segmented hull, to make immediate descent. The Beetle tore through space like a falling star. When it pierced Earth's atmosphere, friction ignited its outer shell in a dull red glow. The craft prowled the skies, scanning the surface for a suitable landing zone. Then, in less than 30 seconds from re-entry to touchdown, it bore down on its target at breathtaking speed and settled onto solid ground with mechanical precision. A low hiss filled the airlock as the landing struts locked into place. Moments later, the hatch ground open, and two Kryptonians clad in airtight armor stepped onto Earth's soil. Their visors retracted to reveal stern faces, and in that instant, mankind realized, it was no longer alone in the universe. Chapter 669: Galaxy Supervisor. Two Kryptonians stood before the assembled troops, clad in jet-black armor like towering, emotionless sentinels. One gripped an energy rifle, his sharp, unblinking gaze sweeping the room with clinical precision. The other, a woman, carried herself with the unmistakable authority of a leader. Their sealed masks lent them an air of inscrutable menace, as if boundless power and hidden agendas lay just beneath those opaque visors. Silence fell over the onlookers, every breath held in anxious anticipation. Then, as tension crackled in the air, the female Kryptonian stepped forward and slowly removed her helmet. The crowd exhaled in unison. Beneath the armor, she looked entirely human, her features fine and expressive, her eyes bright with intelligence. Relief washed through the ranks. She was no monster. Yet in that steady, observant gaze, there remained a reminder that this mission, and these visitors, were far from ordinary. The Kryptonians looked human enough, but their very presence unsettled the world. Here were alien beings whose strength and technology far outmatched our own, and no one knew what they intended or what consequences their arrival might bring. Meanwhile, Ethan watched as Earth's other champions began to move. Wonder Woman, Diana, had no ties to Batman yet, so she struck out on her own. Other heroes followed similarly independent courses, each pursuing the threat in their own way. Batman, however, chose a different path. He set his sights on finding the so-called God of Death, convinced that only a power of that magnitude might stem the Kryptonian tide. He could not, and would not, stand idly by. Ethan, too, had plans that would change everything. Not long after the Kryptonians spirited Clark away, a deeper rift formed between them. Their first act on Earth was to begin reshaping the planet's environment, terraforming its atmosphere, irradiating swaths of land, altering ecosystems, to make it more like Krypton. For Clark Kent, this was an absolute crossing of a line he could never accept. He refused to watch these aliens remake his world without a fight. Inevitably, tensions boiled over and conflict ignited across the globe. Allies and enemies alike would soon discover that no one would walk away unscathed. The battlefield lay in ruins, a stark testament to the Kryptonians' overwhelming power, revealed to humanity for the very first time. Their advanced technology dwarfed anything Earth had ever seen, and every movement they made was infused with raw speed and force. Clark engaged them in a breathtaking duel, each collision sending shockwaves of fear rippling through the onlookers. Just as the combat reached a fever pitch, a lone figure strode onto the field, halting everyone in their tracks. Fiora's voice trembled as she turned to Clark. "Who is that?" The newcomer was Ethan, though his familiar features were almost hidden beneath a suit of immaculate white armor that shimmered with an ethereal blue glow. With no insignia or crest to betray his origin, he might have passed for an Earth ally, if not for the unmistakable authority in his posture. Ethan paused at the center of the wreckage, his gaze sweeping over the assembled fighters. In a deep, steady voice, he declared, "I am the Galactic Supervisor. Your actions constitute a breach of interstellar law. Cease this conflict at once and surrender peacefully. Failure to comply will result in immediate detention at the Galactic Penitentiary. Fiora and the others exchanged uneasy glances, questions and doubts flickering in their eyes. The tide of battle, already in turmoil, now hung poised on the brink of a far greater reckoning. Fiora had never even heard of the Galactic Supervisors, much less of their reach or authority. She frowned at Ethan's bold claim. No stranger could dare threaten Kryptonians, she thought. Their technology and combat prowess were legendary. How could an Earthborn man, or some supposed cosmic overseer, hope to contain them? The notion of a galactic prison sounded ludicrous, the stuff of fairy tales. Yet Ethan's calm, confident bearing gave her pause. He radiated power, as if daring the whole world to challenge him. Fiora drew herself up, a mocking smile curling her lips. "You must be out of your mind," she said, eyes narrowed. "Who do you think you are? What right have you to interfere with our plans?" Ethan met her glare coolly. His expression never wavered, as though he regarded her not as a formidable Kryptonian, but as a mere insect scuttling beneath his boot. "Ignorance isn't the worst sin," Ethan said quietly. "It's ignorance joined with self-righteousness that will destroy you." In the next instant, Fiora staggered as if the weight of a mountain pressed down on her. She strained every muscle, desperate to break free, but Ethan's power was crushing her will. With a soft thud, she collapsed to the ground, face drained of color, eyes wide with panic and disbelief. What kind of power is this?" she gasped, fighting the invisible chains that held her down. Another Kryptonian, her comrade, cried out, "Fiora!" He lunged toward Ethan, intent on rescuing her. But Ethan barely looked in his direction. A cold flicker passed over his eyes, and the newcomer, too, was pinned to the floor by that same unyielding force. His limbs trembled. He could neither fight nor flee. Fear and despair flickered across the two Kryptonians' faces. They had faced threats before, but never anything like this. The man who called himself the Overseer of the Galaxy possessed a power that rendered them helpless, mere insects beneath his boot. Ethan glanced down at them with cool contempt and let out a low, satisfied chuckle. "Humph." Fiora's eyes blazed as she squared off against Ethan, her fists clenched at her sides. "Our Kryptonian civilization spans millennia," she snapped. "We've never heard of this so-called galactic monitor." She took a defiant step forward. "Do you really think inventing a name will intimidate us? That's absurd." Ethan's lips curved into a cold smile. "You wouldn't know," he replied smoothly, "because you're content to cling to outdated myths. The Galactic Monitor is the supranational authority that oversees every civilization in the galaxy. We track their development to make sure no culture grows powerful enough to threaten the cosmic order." Fiora's shoulders shook with barely contained rage. "If this Galactic Monitor actually exists," she snarled, voice trembling, "why weren't you there to save Krypton when it fell?" Ethan met her glare with unblinking calm. His tone was flat, almost clinical. "Every civilization charts its own destiny," he said. "If Krypton collapsed, it was because of choices made long before we ever arrived. You can't blame an outside force for a people's self-destruction." A furious silence stretched between them. Fiora's heart pounded in her chest. She refused to accept his hard-hearted logic. Krypton was one of the universe's greatest powers. It should never have perished so easily. She opened her mouth to argue, but the words died on her tongue. Ethan's gaze was steady as he spoke. "As Milky Way supervisor, my responsibility is to preserve the galaxy's order and balance, not to swoop in and save every civilization on the verge of collapse. Your own pride and arrogance as Kryptonians led to your downfall, and that is a burden you must bear yourselves." Chapter 670, "You violated the law," the tribunal member thundered. "Silence!" Fiora snapped, every inch of her bristling with defiance. She would not stand for anyone belittling her people. Her very soul burned with the pride and dignity of the Kryptonians. And who could blame her? Since her arrival on Earth, sent by General Zod to capture Kal-El, she'd suffered setback after setback. Kal-El had slipped through her grasp, humanity had risen against her, and now a mysterious galactic overseer had suddenly appeared to complicate matters even further. The weight of failure pressed on her like a lead cloak. But Fiora was no quitter. Determination hardened her features as she reached for the comm on her gauntlet. "General Zod," she said, her voice steady, "I request immediate reinforcements." Thousands of light years away, the name of the Kryptonian military commander carried instant respect and fear. Renowned for his tactical brilliance and unmatched combat prowess, Zod held the highest rank in their society. Fiercely loyal to his people and ever watchful of his subordinates, he would not ignore Fiora's plea. Aid was coming, and with it, the full might of Krypton. General Zod had sensed something was wrong with Fiora's status report, so he took the controls of the spacecraft and set a direct course for Earth. He knew Fiora's reputation well. She was his trusted lieutenant and one of Krypton's finest warriors, cool under fire, gifted with extraordinary strength, and capable of facing any foe without hesitation. Yet the moment she transmitted a Level 1 distress call, the highest possible priority, he understood she must be in grave danger. Unwilling to risk his troops, Zod immediately altered course. Anxiety knotted in his chest. He feared not only for Fiora's safety, but also for the fate of Krypton's entire mission. "Did you call for backup?" Ethan's question cut through the tense hush, calm and unwavering, as if his very words could slice through chaos and steady everyone's nerves. Fiora froze. Slowly, she turned toward Ethan, her expression a tangled mix of confusion, wary vigilance, and a fleeting hint of fear. Fiora didn't answer at once. She stayed silent, her eyes distant, as though weighing Ethan's question. Clark drifted to the side, his gaze flickering between Ethan and Fiora. The tension between them was palpable, and Clark found himself more confused than ever. He couldn't read Ethan's motives behind the question, nor could he fathom the expression on Fiora's face. Suddenly, a colossal spacecraft blotted out the sky above Earth. It hung there like a massive meteor, its hull shimmering with a cold, pale light. Emblazoned on its side was the unmistakable emblem of the Kryptonians. The ship's hatch opened, and General Zod strode out, his eyes as sharp as an eagle's, sweeping the ground below. When he spotted Fiora and the other Kryptonian lieutenant lying motionless on the earth, his brow creased with concern. He hurried forward, crouching beside them to assess their condition. Although their bodies lay still, their breathing and heartbeats were steady, only their limbs remained locked in stasis. Zod let out a quiet sigh of relief, the tension in his shoulders easing ever so slightly. General Zod rose to his full height, eyes flashing with cold light as he stared at Ethan and Clark. "Fiora, report." His voice was low and powerful, each word seeming to slice through the air. Fiora drew a steadying breath and recounted their mission on Earth. How they tracked Clark Kent across the globe, engaged him in battle, and ultimately met their defeat at the hands of Ethan. Though her tone remained measured, her eyes blazed with anger and frustration, especially when she spoke of Ethan's true nature. "He claims to be the inspector of the galaxy," she said, leaning forward. "He wields tremendous power and possesses abilities we can barely comprehend." General Zod fell silent, weighing her words. "Inspector of the galaxy?" he murmured, brows knitted in disbelief. He had never heard of such a title. A tense quiet settled over the chamber as Zod's expression grew sharper, colder. He fixed Ethan with a stare that seemed to bore right through him. Suspicion and hostility coiled in every line of his face. At last, his deep voice echoed through the hall. "Who are you?" Ethan's voice crackled with menace, every word laced with barely contained fury, as if he might strike at any moment. Yet he stood before General Zod unflinchingly, meeting Zod's glare with steady composure. "I've already told you," he said calmly. "I am the Milky Way Inspector. My mandate is to oversee the healthy development of every civilization in this galaxy and to preserve universal peace and stability. Your actions, your Kryptonians' actions, have violated the Milky Way's laws. I cannot allow it to continue." There was a resonant power behind Ethan's tone, each syllable cutting straight to Zod's core. His eyes were alight with unshakable authority, as if he truly wielded some supreme office. But General Zod's scowl only deepened. In all his years roaming the cosmos, he'd never heard of a galactic inspector. To Zod, Ethan sounded like nothing more than a brash, overconfident upstart. A cruel smile twisted Zod's lips. "Believe what you will," he sneered. "It doesn't matter whether I accept your claim. What matters is whether you can actually stop us. Tell me, Inspector, what makes you think you're the savior of the galaxy?" General Zod's lips curled into a sneer. "Let me remind you," he rumbled. "Our Kryptonian Empire once went toe-to-toe with the Green Lantern Corps, and they couldn't even slow us down. So tell me, Inspector, why do you think you're any different? He spat the words as though the very name of the Corps were beneath contempt. Across from him, Ethan let that challenge slide off his shoulders. He offered a faint, confident smile. You're right that the Green Lanterns are powerful, Ethan said evenly, but our mandates don't overlap. Their mission is to patrol and police sectors of the universe. Mine is to ensure every civilization in the Milky Way respects the natural laws and moral principles that keep the galaxy in balance. You have already broken those principles, so I have no choice but to intervene. He spoke as if quoting an unassailable decree, fully aware that the authority behind his words was backed by unimaginable power. Whether General Zod believed him or not didn't matter. Ethan was prepared to prove his claim against anyone who dared to stand in his way. Chapter 671, My Power is Stronger Than Yours. Ethan's eyes burned with conviction as he faced General Zod. My power surpasses yours, Zod. Have you never heard of the Galaxy Supervisor? Of course you haven't. Your narrow vision can't grasp anything above you. Once someone fixes on an idea, even the slightest contradiction is bent, twisted, and rationalized away. We call that mental supplementation. He paused, letting his words hang in the charged air. Believe what you will. The fact is, you've violated the Galaxy Justice Law. If you insist on resisting, I'll be forced to take necessary measures. General Zod's lips curled into a cruel sneer. Then try to stop me. With that, Zod lunged. In a heartbeat, he was upon Ethan, moving with terrifying speed, his fist crackling with raw energy, aimed to pulverize everything in its path. But as his blow descended, Zod was halted by an unseen force. A crushing pressure slammed into him, pinning him in place and draining the strength from his limbs. Zod's eyes widened in shock. His fist hung frozen inches from Ethan, the power behind it stifled by an invisible barrier. For the first time, the general tasted uncertainty, and it unsettled him to his core. A weight like a mountain pressed down on General Zod's head, crushing his will. Even in his advanced Kryptonian armor, he staggered under the invisible force. He raised a fist toward Ethan, but it felt miles away, utterly out of reach. Kneel. Ethan's voice was quiet, yet it struck Zod's core like thunder. Instantly, the gravity around Zod doubled, and he collapsed to his knees with a bone-shaking thud. He tried to push himself up, tried to fight back, but his limbs refused to obey. "General!" cried one of the 10 Kryptonian soldiers, charging forward to help. In the next heartbeat, every last one of them was slammed to the ground, bound as if by invisible chains. They thrashed and struggled, helpless, and it finally clicked. Fiora and the others hadn't been struck down by chance. It was Ethan's doing. Zod lay on the floor, chest heaving, eyes locked on Ethan. Never before had he felt such power, and in that moment he understood Ethan's true strength. Words caught in his throat. There was nothing left to say. Ethan's eyes bore into General Zod, his expression dark with anger and refusal. But he kept his own emotions carefully in check as he surveyed Zod and the Kryptonian soldiers before him. Though they crouched under the weight of his power, Ethan knew they would never truly submit. They were Kryptonians, after all, beings of immense strength and unbreakable pride. "Your actions have violated the Galactic Justice Act," Ethan declared, his voice echoing through the silent command chamber. Each word landed like a hammer blow against Zod's defenses. For the first time since this confrontation began, the formidable general of Krypton appeared unsettled. He glared back at Ethan, frustration and fury flickering in his eyes. His soldiers, once so unwavering in their loyalty, fell into uneasy quiet. They understood better than anyone the danger of opposing a man who spoke with such unwavering resolve. Ethan took a measured step forward, letting the silence stretch. "Abandon your plan to conquer Earth," he continued, "and I will consider offering you a path to redemption." A red flare of rage lit Zod's face at the very notion. But Ethan remained perfectly still, his calm certainty only amplifying the challenge. The once invincible general clenched his fists, the tension in the room crackling like electricity. No one spoke. The moment held on a knife edge, and both sides knew the real battle was only just beginning. Ethan stood before General Zod, the newly appointed guardian of Krypton, struggling to contain his frustration. As Krypton's protector, Zod should never have conceded so easily, but Ethan also knew that if Zod continued to resist, the fallout could be catastrophic. He drew in a steadying breath and forced his anger down to a simmer. "Why are you giving up so soon?" he demanded. Zod bellowed in fury, his voice echoing off the chamber walls. Ethan allowed himself a small, knowing smile. "Because my power far exceeds yours," he said coolly. "Isn't the law of the jungle the only truth that matters? Why do you keep asking why when the answer is obvious?" Zod's roar died in his throat. He had built his entire doctrine around ruthless strength, yet here he was, silenced by Ethan's simple assertion. Gathering himself, Ethan pressed on, his tone even more deliberate. "And besides, the universe contains countless worlds teeming with life. Why obsess over Earth above all the others?" Suddenly, Fiora sprang from her seat, her eyes blazing. "We've searched for more than 30 years, she cried. "Earth is the only planet we've found that sustains life." Desperation and disbelief trembled in her voice as the weight of their mission and their failure settled over the room. Ethan watched Fiora with a calm, unflinching gaze. "You're worthless," he said quietly. "If you'd dedicated half as much effort to exploring the cosmos, you'd have discovered more inhabited worlds by now." His words cut deeper than any blade. Fiora's cheeks flushed red, but no retort came to her lips. She knew he was right. For over 30 years their fleet had scoured the galaxy, only now had they finally come upon Earth. Yet that discovery offered no excuse for conquest. "You," Fiora began, jabbed a finger at him, then fell silent, her anger choking off her words. General Zod stepped forward, drawing a slow breath to steady the tension in the chamber. He leveled a stern look at Ethan. "I'll ask you again," he said, enunciating each word. "Why are you so fiercely protective of this planet?" Ethan's expression remained unchanged. "I'm not showing favoritism," he replied evenly. "I safeguard every world that harbors life. That's how we preserve balance and justice throughout the universe." Ethan met General Zod's glare without flinching. "If Krypton fell because of an alien invasion," Ethan said quietly, "I'd stand with you, but that's not what happened. Your world was torn apart by its own people." Zod's face went scarlet. He bellowed, "Silence! You know nothing of our pain, nothing of our duty. You see us as fools, as outsiders." Ethan tipped his head, unfazed by the outburst. "My purpose," he replied evenly, "is to safeguard life and uphold justice across the cosmos. Krypton didn't perish at the hands of strangers. It destroyed itself through endless feuds and betrayals. And now you mean to atone by subjugating other worlds? That's no different from the ruin you brought upon your own planet." Zod's chest heaved, pain and fury warring behind his eyes. He stamped a fist on the floor. "My purpose," he roared, "is to protect Krypton, to protect my people." Silence fell as Ethan and the general stared each other down, each convinced of his own righteousness. Chapter 672, General Zod sows discord. General Zod stood unmoving, his gaze fixed on Ethan. Eyes tempered by Krypton's crushing pressures, they burned with unshakable resolve and a fanatic intensity. His voice cut through the battlefield's uneasy silence, ringing with absolute conviction. "This is the only mission I have ever undertaken. Every choice I've made, every sacrifice was for this cause alone. And you, what right do you have to lecture me? To decide the fate of my people in favor of those on this world beneath our feet?" Ethan's expression remained composed. His eyes, as still and fathomless as a mountain lake, betrayed a faint shadow of regret beneath their calm. He inclined his head in acknowledgement of Zod's unwavering dedication. "I admire your sense of duty," Ethan said quietly, his voice gentle yet unyielding, carrying a weight that seemed to reach straight into the soul. "But duty does not grant anyone the right to trample the lives and rights of others. The extinction of your people on Krypton stands as a profound warning, a lesson I hope you'll learn. There is still a path to real peace and lasting prosperity." Zod's brow tightened. His pride in Krypton's glory flared, but he refused to listen to Ethan's words. He recognized all too clearly the chasm between his own strength and that of the supervising arbiter. Yet the pride and dignity of the Kryptonian people would not allow him to bow to such a crushing defeat. Even so, he knew he stood no chance against Ethan, and that sense of helplessness churned inside him like molten iron. Kryptonians do not fear death, but to perish without striking a single blow was an indignity General Zod could not bear. He understood that direct confrontation was hopeless. They would have to find some other path to their goal. At that moment, Batman and Wonder Woman swept onto the scene. Before them lay a scattered assembly of Kryptonians, wounded and subdued, and at their center stood Ethan, an enigmatic figure the heroes met with guarded suspicion. Neither fully understood what had transpired, only that the air crackled with unease. Then Ethan's gaze drifted toward the horizon. The others followed his stare and felt their breath catch. Far off, 3 pinpricks of shadow hovered against the sky, tiny, silent, and ominously still, like motes of dust in the wind. But as the minutes passed, those 3 dark blips on the radar closed in with terrifying speed. They swelled into sharp metallic silhouettes, not mere specks, but unmistakable missiles, each one edged with the lethal precision of a warhead. "What is that?" Clark gasped, his voice thick with dread. "Nuclear warheads," Batman replied, his eyes narrowing at the radiation symbols stamped on the missiles. A cold fury flashed through him. He hadn't believed America would resort to nukes against them now. It was madness, suicidal even, threatening not just the Kryptonians, but all life on Earth. Clark swallowed. The arrival of these alien refugees had unsettled humanity. Their superhuman abilities and advanced technologies sparked awe and increasingly fear. Yet here was something even more terrifying, a catastrophic decision made in half-knowledge. No one really understood what had transpired between Ethan and General Zod, or why the Kryptonians had fallen to Earth in the first place. Now, nuclear missiles were on a collision course with the planet, an irreversible gamble with the fate of every living thing. Batman and his team had only just arrived, and none of them fully understood the scope of the crisis. All they knew was that Earth faced an imminent nuclear strike, and that failure to act now would mean total annihilation. Alarms blared as Ethan stood at the central console, every screen around him flashing red. Bruce Wayne, Batman, surveyed the readouts with grim determination. Nightwing and Batwoman exchanged tense glances. The room crackled with urgency. Then General Zod's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Supervisor, you're still within the bomb's lethal radius." Ethan met the projection of Zod's smug visage without flinching. He inclined his head in calm acknowledgement, revealing nothing of the turmoil inside. "You see," Zod continued, his tone heavy with triumph, "these Earthlings have made the first move against me. Under galactic doctrine, I have full authority to retaliate. You must stand down and let me deliver justice." Ethan's expression hardened. "Protecting innocent lives is also under my purview. I won't allow you to threaten this planet." The general laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the comm channels. "We'll see how far your so-called jurisdiction protects you when my forces unleash devastation." Before anyone could respond, the room trembled with the distant rumble of an explosion. Every second now counted. Batman drew his cowl tighter. "Status report, Ethan. Where's that warhead?" Ethan's fingers flew across the console. "We've narrowed it down to 3 possible sites. I'm dispatching drones now." A blast wave rattled the base again, cutting him off. Ethan straightened, resolve flashing in his eyes. "We stop that bomb, or we lose everything." Without another word, the heroes sprang into action. The fight for Earth had begun. General Zod regarded Ethan, the galactic overseer, as an inflexible pillar of authority. Elevated far above any ordinary being, he possessed vast power and brooked no challenge to his will. Any who dared defy him would face swift and severe punishment. Yet, in spite of the Kryptonians' overwhelming might, the tide of battle had unexpectedly turned, ironically, because of the very recklessness of Earth's champions. Zod had exploited that recklessness, sowing doubt and discord among the defenders. He believed that if Ethan simply stayed his hand, nothing on Earth could stand against the Kryptonian juggernaut. As he outlined this plan, Batman absorbed every word, his brow furrowing. He kicked at a patch of dirt, eyes locked on Ethan. Could this mysterious overseer really be the linchpin of the entire war? Had the sudden weakness in the Kryptonians, their bodies crashing to the ground, been orchestrated by Ethan's intervention? Suspicion and curiosity warred in Batman's mind, laced with a sharp-edged vigilance. But even as Zod issued his warning, Ethan remained unshaken. He met Zod's gaze with imperturbable calm. Not a muscle in his deep-set eyes flickered. "Yes," Ethan said softly, "they would be unstoppable if I turned away, once. But the situation has changed now." His words hung in the air like a challenge. Around them, the battlefield stilled as both ally and enemy awaited his next move. Ethan's voice was calm, almost detached. There's a threat to my safety, and I have every right to step in. No sooner had the words left his lips than a thunderous roar split the sky. 3 nuclear warheads, once locked on target, had gone haywire. In a heartbeat, they plummeted earthward, too fast for anyone to react. Clark's eyes widened. No, they have to detonate over an uninhabited area, or countless lives will be lost. Beside him, Batman clenched his jaw. Even the others exchanged grim looks. They all understood the stakes. A nuclear blast in a populated zone meant disaster on an unimaginable scale. Yet they were powerless to stop the missile's deadly descent. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm them, something extraordinary happened. The 3 warheads stalled in midair. They shattered apart as if caught in an invisible vice, their guidance and firing mechanisms crushed into useless scrap. There was no explosion, only the rustle of metal fragments drifting earthward harmlessly. Through it all, Ethan stood unmoved. His expression was composed, his posture unshaken. In his eyes lay the quiet assurance of someone who had anticipated every outcome. As the debris fluttered to the ground around them, Clark and the others could only stare in awe. Whatever force Ethan had summoned had not only prevented catastrophe, it had done so with surgical precision. And when it was over, he simply lowered his gaze, as if nothing at all had happened. Chapter 673, Earth's Reckoning. Batman and his allies came to an abrupt halt as an invisible, crushing pressure rolled over the battlefield. None of them could fathom the extent of this newcomer's power, or guess how he would settle the war, but they sensed immediately that everything had changed. General Zod, normally the picture of cold command, staggered backward in shock and outrage. His carefully laid plan had unraveled in an instant, undone by what looked like a casual gesture from a single man. With furious indignation, he roared, "Earth attacked the Galactic Overseer without authorization. Will there be no consequences?" At that moment, Batman and the rest realized the truth. The figure standing before them was no ordinary combatant, but Ethan, the legendary Galactic Overseer. A wave of awe and a deeper, more terrible dread washed over the defenders of Earth. Ethan's arrival had struck their forces like a cosmic meteor, shattering every strategy they'd prepared. Batman felt a knot tighten in his chest. The war they thought they commanded was slipping beyond their control. Ethan stood silently, his inscrutable gaze fixed on Batman. Neither of them spoke for a long moment, and the tension in the vast chamber felt almost suffocating. Batman's cape rustled as he shifted uncomfortably under Ethan's scrutiny. I swear there's been a misunderstanding," Batman stammered, forcing himself to stand tall. His voice was firm but wavering. He knew the words he chose here could decide humanity's fate. Behind him, the assembled Kryptonians watched in eerie silence, their imposing forms half illuminated by the chamber's cold blue light. Ethan's expression remained unreadable. Finally, he inclined his head and asked softly, "Are you the representative of Earth?" Batman's heart pounded. He felt as though he were a lone deer caught in the glare of a cheetah's eyes. No escape, nowhere to hide. Every instinct screamed at him to bolt, but he forced himself to nod. "Yes," he said, swallowing hard. "I've come to explain." Ethan held up a hand, still watching in those fathomless eyes. The silence stretched on, punctuated only by the distant hum of machinery and the soft echo of their breathing. Batman felt the weight of every life on Earth pressing down on him, the burden of being humanity's voice in this cosmic confrontation. At last, Ethan lowered his hand. "Speak, representative of men," he commanded, "and convince me why I should trust you and your world." Ethan's face remained impassive as he replied, "I'm not the aggressor here. The Kryptonians struck first, and everything the people of Earth did was a defensive response." His words carried a note of desperation, an appeal to the supervisor's sense of justice. But Ethan merely inclined his head. "That makes sense," he said coolly. He let his gaze sweep slowly across the assembled group, General Zod, Clark, Batman, and Wonder Woman included. "Let us not forget," he continued, "that no one may challenge the authority of the supervisor." A low growl rumbled from General Zod's throat, thick with fury and indignation. Before he could unleash it, though, Ethan raised a single hand. In an instant, a suffocating weight pressed down on every person in the chamber. Batman's knees buckled. Wonder Woman's feet sank into the floor. Clark's breath came in ragged gasps. the invisible force bore down like a mountain, pinning them to the earth. Batman dared to wonder, is this some form of artificial gravity? But the answer lay beyond even his formidable detective skills. Ethan's voice cut through the stunned silence, calm and unhurried. It's only natural that humans misunderstand what's happening, but the fact remains, they attacked me first. In order to uphold the authority of the Galactic Supervisors, Earth will be barred from joining the Galactic Civilization Alliance for the next 10,000 years. Ethan's voice was calm, but his declaration hit every listener like a thunderclap. A stunned silence fell over the crowd, faces drained of color, eyes wide with shock and despair. 1,000 years. It was a span almost impossible for humans to grasp. Since the first industrial revolution, we've only enjoyed a few short centuries of rapid advancement. 10 millennia, by comparison, feels like an entire age. And Ethan had delivered this verdict live to the entire planet, an instant, inescapable global judgment. Around the world, people stared at their screens, hearts pounding with confusion and outrage. None could fully comprehend, let alone accept, such a draconian sentence. This news exploded like a blockbuster bomb, setting off a storm of emotions, fear, anger, helplessness. After all, humanity has always gazed at the stars with yearning and curiosity, eager to make contact with other civilizations, to glean their technologies, to share in the riches of the galaxy. Now those dreams lay shattered at our feet. The Galactic Civilization Alliance was long a source of wonder and aspiration for all of humanity. Since the first radio signals reached the stars, we had dreamed of joining that interstellar federation, of sharing in its vast technological breakthroughs, of trading resources with distant worlds, of forging friendships across the galaxy. Like a cosmic United Nations, it promised cooperation on a scale our planet had never known. But that dream has been cruelly dashed. Yesterday, the Alliance's Supreme Supervisor, Ethan, issued a ruling that not only refuses Earth's application, but bars us from reapplying for 10 millennia. The blow could not have been more devastating. In an instant, a generation of hope turned to ashes. Nations accustomed to rivalry now share a collective grief. We are locked out of the one opportunity that might have rescued humanity's future. At the center of this fiasco lies the United States. Acting unilaterally, its government bypassed established diplomatic channels and broadcast a classified military prototype into Alliance space, an act the Alliance regarded as a breach of trust and a provocation. Supervisor Ethan, interpreting this as a willful violation of interstellar protocols, responded not with a warning, but with a stunning, unambiguous verdict. Earth is in disgrace. Across the globe, leaders scrambled to contain the fallout. In capitals from Brussels to Beijing, statements poured forth condemning the U.S. misstep and urging unity in the face of this unprecedented setback. We must stand together, declared the Secretary-General of the United Nations. Our planet's future depends on it. Yet despite their appeals and an emergency summit convened in New York, Supervisor Ethan's decision stands. The Alliance remains resolute. Now, Earth's greatest minds are rallying to find another way forward. Teams of astrophysicists, engineers, and diplomats are working around the clock, searching for a path to redemption in the eyes of the Alliance. Some propose technological gifts, others advocate for new, rigorous peace accords. All agree on one urgent truth. If humanity is to reclaim its place among the stars, we must learn from this humiliation, and above all, prove to Supervisor Ethan that we are worthy of trust. They pored over Ethan's ruling, hunting for loopholes or a single flaw, only to find his verdict ironclad. His authority derived from the unassailable office of the Galactic Custodian, and no court could overturn it. Let this be a lesson, Earthlings, Ethan declared, his tone measured but unwavering. General Zod and his officers exchanged incredulous looks. 10,000 years, surely they'd expected something far sterner. Worse still, the Custodian had spared Earth from complete annihilation. The decision rankled more than any punishment could. Batman half rose to speak, but Ethan's steady gaze cut him off. Neither Batman nor Wonder Woman dared press the issue, and even Clark Kent remained respectfully silent. Ethan shifted his attention to Zod. As for you, General, your unauthorized invasions of countless civilizations violate Galactic Justice Code 47. I hereby sentence you to 10,000 years in the Cosmic Penitentiary. A stunned hush fell over Zod's contingent, They had only just escaped the infamous Phantom Prison. To face another 10 millennia behind bars seemed beyond comprehension. What horrors awaited in a place rumored to devour souls and rewrite time itself? Even Zod's bravado faltered before the cold finality of Ethan's sentence. Chapter 674. Give a Chance. General Zod stood frozen, unable to find words. A 10,000-year sentence for a Kryptonian was beyond comprehension. Stripped of sunlight and cut off from the yellow sun's life-giving power, they had no means to endure such a fate. Would they be sealed in unconscious stasis? Frozen solid but conscious, unable even to move? Or simply locked away, forced to watch millennia pass in hopeless confinement? Fear and helplessness flickered in Zod's eyes as he surveyed the faces of his fellow clansmen. Shock and despair mirrored his own. This verdict was not only a crushing personal blow, it threatened the very future of their people. A 10,000-year sentence, Zod murmured, his voice choked with bitterness. He could hardly imagine enduring that endless darkness, that unbearable loneliness. Worse still was the realization that this punishment might amount to the Kryptonians' extinction. He clenched his fists, willing himself to find resolve. But in that moment, all he could feel was the weight of an unimaginable void stretching out before them, and the faint, desperate hope that somehow, against all odds, a chance might still remain. General Zod inhaled deeply and squared his shoulders in the silent War Council chamber. The order to launch the invasion was mine alone, he declared, his voice ringing against the stone walls. I bear full responsibility. If punishment must come, let it fall on me. A tense hush fell over the assembled officers. Fiora sprang to her feet, eyes blazing. General. Silence, Zod cut her off, his gaze sharpening. I will not allow any of you to share my burden. Fiora pressed on, her voice unwavering. No, this was my unauthorized action. I insist that Your protests are needless, Zod replied, voice cold with authority. He turned to the overseer waiting by the chamber door. Overseer Ethan, take me into custody. Ethan, the Kryptonian officer charged with security, stepped forward without a word. His expression remained impassive behind his polished helm. General, please, Fiora began, but found her words strangled by the rigid discipline woven into her very blood. Ever since birth, the military caste had been drilled into Kryptonian fighters. Obedience was absolute. No sudden surge of emotion could overturn millennia of genetic conditioning. Zod offered her a final solemn nod. This is my last command as your superior. You will obey. Fiora's shoulders slumped, and she bowed her head. As Ethan advanced to clamp the heavy cuffs around Zod's wrists, the chamber's heavy doors groaned shut behind them. In that echoing click, hope and conviction intertwined. One man's sacrifice, the fragile duty of another, and the unbreakable chain of command that bound them all. General. Fiora's voice trembled as she stared at the tribunal before her. She'd never imagined having to make a choice like this. As commander, I alone will shoulder the blame, she said, forcing herself to meet each Kryptonian officer's eyes. No matter what sentence I receive, you must all keep fighting for the future of Krypton. General Zod's gaze softened with both love and resolve. He turned toward Ethan, the supervising officer, and spoke in a clear, sonorous tone. Escort me, supervisor. I accept full responsibility for these crimes and will bear the consequences alone. A knot tightened in Fiora's chest. As Zod's most devoted deputy and one of the brightest hopes for her world, she felt torn between loyalty and helplessness. She could do nothing but watch her commander prepare to face judgment. Standing just behind Fiora, Clark struggled to contain his emotions. He understood the agony consuming Zod, yet as an Earthman, he could not condone Krypton's aggression toward his adopted home. His conflicted silence spoke volumes. At the edge of the chamber, Batman remained impassive, his dark eyes calculating. He had never recognized a moral prohibition against eliminating extraterrestrial threats. Silence settled over the gathered assembly as Ethan stepped forward to lead Zod away, each man bound by duty and each heart heavy with the price of war. Ethan understood all too well what would happen if the Kryptonians succeeded in conquering Earth, untold suffering for every creature on the planet. He felt no sympathy for General Zod's ultimatum. Beside him, Wonder Woman said nothing, merely standing her ground with unwavering determination. No matter how this standoff ended, she was prepared to defend Earth's peace and justice. Then, Ethan allowed himself a small, confident smile. "You needn't worry," he said. "My offer isn't finished." General Zod and his lieutenant Fiora exchanged startled looks. Could the tide actually be turning? Ethan continued, his voice steady. "By the letter of the Galactic Accords, you have broken the law, but only because you were unaware of it. In that ignorance, no crime was intended. So I'm prepared to give you a chance to make things right." A spark of hope lit their eyes. This was the opening they'd been waiting for. Fiora spoke first, her voice tinged with relief. "What must we do?" Zod leaned forward, his gaze locked on Ethan's. Ethan met his stare evenly and said, "All you want is a world you can call your own. As overseer of this sector, I can locate a habitable planet, one that meets the galaxy's standards of justice and life. In exchange for withdrawing your forces from Earth and pledging to abide by the Accords, that world will be yours. No conquest, no bloodshed." Silence fell as Zod and Fiora absorbed Ethan's proposal. Outside the viewport, Earth hung like a fragile jewel in the void, its fate now resting on the Kryptonian's answer. Ethan paused, folding his arms across his chest. "But the real question is, what can you offer?" Batman watched him closely. Of course, Ethan would provide General Zod and the others a way out. After all, they were all Kryptonians. Ethan himself wasn't born pure. Yet he'd become one through extraordinary means. Something in Ethan's gaze caught Batman's attention. A flicker of curiosity, even compassion, that went beyond strict adherence to the law. As the self-appointed overseer of the galaxy, Ethan was supposed to be impartial, upholding cosmic justice without favoritism. And yet, in this moment, Batman saw a different side, one marked by deeper considerations. He felt a surge of relief that the galaxy operated under a codified system of law. It meant alien civilizations had established rules and order rather than descending into chaos. Still, Batman knew that with such diversity of species, cultures, and beliefs, legal principles would vary wildly and sometimes clash. He wondered which statutes in the Galactic Code might jar against Earth's laws. Perhaps, on some worlds, practices that seemed brutal by human standards were legally sanctioned to ensure a species' survival. He studied Ethan's face, ready to press further, determined to understand just how far the galaxy's version of justice and mercy would stretch. On countless worlds across the galaxy, the relentless pursuit of knowledge and wisdom stands as the highest ideal. Every law ever written, every decree ever handed down, orbits that central truth. Yet law and justice, though closely intertwined, do not always march in step. At times, strict legality can clash with the deeper demands of fairness. Batman, ever the seeker of truth, has long hungered to learn the intricacies of the Galactic Code of Justice. But Earth has just been condemned to a 10-millennium exile from the Galactic Civilization Alliance, severing every lane of inquiry. No archive, no envoy, no loophole remains through which he might gain access. And then word reached him of General Zod's downfall, an unexpected vulnerability in one of the Alliance's fiercest warriors. Could this crisis be the leverage needed to force a reconsideration of Earth's sentence? In the soaring council chamber of the Galactic Supervisor, Ethan, tall, composed, his sharp gaze reflecting centuries of interstellar lawmaking, listened as Batman laid out his case. Every word hung in the vast silence that followed. On either, our side of Ethan stood General Zod and Fiora, once proud champions of their own worlds, now humbled by circumstance. At Ethan's measured pause, they exchanged a glance heavy with unspoken questions. What price would secure Earth's reprieve, and at what cost to themselves? They understood that offers of assistance and alliance could be bought only with sacrifice. Yet the alternative, eternal isolation for their home planet, left them no real choice. Hope, fragile but fierce, kindled in their hearts. In that moment, they knew they would agree to whatever terms Ethan demanded. It was their only way forward. Chapter 675. We will give everything. General Zod's voice rang out, unwavering. We will give everything. For the future of Krypton, we're prepared to pay any price. Fiora nodded firmly at his side. I stand with you, General. Ethan allowed himself a small, knowing smile. Excellent. Then let us discuss the specifics. What followed was a grueling, high-stakes marathon of negotiation. General Zod felt the weight of his people's survival pressing on every word he spoke. One wrong concession could doom the entire Kryptonian race. Fiora, his most trusted aide, matched his intensity. her eyes bright with equal parts curiosity about the unknown and hope for what lay ahead. And throughout it all, Ethan remained serenely in control, the faint curve of his lips betraying none of his thoughts. He was not merely a participant in these talks, but the unseen director of an interstellar drama. His goals were clear: secure a new home for the refugees of Krypton and demonstrate the power and wisdom of the Galactic Overseer. They began by laying out the planet's essential parameters: size, gravity, atmosphere, available water, agricultural potential, and mineral wealth. Zod and Fiora pressed him on every detail. Ethan answered with precision, quoting orbital mechanics charts and climate projections as though reciting poetry. When they shifted to infrastructure, energy sources, transport networks, defense systems, Ethan proposed modular starborne harvesters and self-replicating factories capable of springing to life in days. Each suggestion struck a careful balance between ambition and feasibility, reassuring the Kryptonians that their new world would be more than a refuge. It would be a thriving cradle for their civilization's rebirth. Hours passed like minutes. As the first hints of Krypton's twin suns would have risen back home, the three delegates reached a consensus on every major point. General Zod leaned back, tension easing from his broad shoulders. Fiora allowed herself a single, relieved breath. Ethan's smile widened ever so slightly, satisfied that the stage was set. They had agreed. A new chapter for Krypton was about to begin, and under Ethan's watchful guidance, it would be one of hope, renewal, and enduring strength. General Zod opened the meeting by laying out the essential criteria for their new homeland. The planet must offer ample natural resources to sustain Kryptonian life, he declared. Its atmosphere, gravity, and solar radiation must align with our physiology. Ethan stepped forward. I will lead a full-spectrum survey of the target world, he promised, deploying orbital scanners and surface probes to confirm every vital parameter. With that assignment in place, the discussion turned to resource management. Zod made it clear that once they settled, no Kryptonian should go without. Sufficient minerals, energy sources, and arable land would be set aside to support the colony's growth. Next, they examined the rights and responsibilities each settler would assume. Zod affirmed that on this new world, every Kryptonian would enjoy personal freedom, the right to raise families, and the liberty to advance technologically. But those rights would carry obligations in equal measure. They must respect any native ecosystems, safeguard the planet's environment, and uphold a culture of peace and equality among all inhabitants. After several hours of rigorous debate and negotiation, a unanimous agreement was reached. This pact was more than a diplomatic formality. It marked the turning point for the Kryptonian people. At last, they would have a true chance to rebuild their civilization from the ground up on a fresh, untarnished world. They would pay a substantial share of their resources to the Galaxy Overseer as both compensation and tribute, and in return, they would be bound to serve under the Overseer's command for a fixed term. To most, that price seemed steep. To Ethan, however, it was a small ransom to salvage something of value from the wreckage of his lost world. Once the treaty was signed, Ethan rose to his feet. A hush fell over the assembly as a strange light flickered in his eyes. With a graceful motion of his hand, he activated the central holoprojector. Instantly, a breathtaking diorama bloomed into view, a perfect, living replica of Earth. Deep blue oceans rippled, continents gleamed emerald beneath drifting white clouds. Every detail was so vivid that the audience leaned forward, spellbound, as if they could step through the image and set foot on home soil once more. But Ethan let them linger only for a moment. He swept his hand through the air again, and the hologram began to contract. The oceans and continents blurred, the clouds coalesced and spiraled inward. In mere seconds, the proud globe shrank to a marble-sized orb, drifting ever farther away until it was no more than a faint point against the velvet backdrop of space, and then even that vanished. At once, the projection shifted. Galaxies swirled into being. Nebulae blossomed in fiery reds and purples. Stars shimmered in clusters of silver and gold, and countless planets, each a gem in its own right, glinted in the cosmic dark. Worlds of every imaginable color and composition revolved silently across the boundless void. Ethan held their gaze as the panorama unfolded. Behind him, the murmurs of the crowd grew into an eager hush, and in that charged silence, he knew he had their undivided attention and their hopes squarely in his hands. Ethan stood at the front of the hall, watching his audience with a quiet satisfaction as the projection before them came to life. On the screen, the planet Earth receded into the distance, at first barely noticeable against the vastness, then shrinking until it vanished entirely. Gasps filled the room. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the inexhaustible depths of space unfolding before them. For a moment, it felt as if they were suspended in an enormous cosmic sandbox, witnessing the universe's immensity firsthand. The sensation of infinity pressed upon their minds, dwarfing all sense of human scale. Yet alongside that overwhelming immensity bloomed a fierce curiosity, a longing to understand what wonders might lie beyond. Ethan smiled and lifted his hand in a casual gesture. The image shifted seamlessly. Suddenly, the scattered stars and colorful nebula coalesced into a sweeping panorama of the Milky Way galaxy. A spiraling vortex of starlight filled the screen, each arm shimmering with countless suns. Here and there, ghostly clouds of gas glowed with newborn stars incubating in cold cosmic nurseries. Dark silhouettes marked the presence of black holes, pulsars pulsed with eerie regularity. The audience sat speechless, eyes wide with awe. Ethan began his commentary in a clear, steady voice. This is our galaxy, over 100 billion stars bound together by gravity's embrace. To your left, you'll see the Orion Arm, our solar system's neighborhood. These bright clusters here are the Pleiades, and over there, the dark rift known as the Great Rift. He paced slowly, pointing out nebula, star clusters, and exotic objects in turn, each revelation sparking murmurs of astonishment. As Ethan guided them through the Milky Way's splendors, he could feel their excitement growing. In that moment, he knew he had done more than just show them images of space. He had ignited their wonder, opening their eyes to the grandeur of the cosmos, and with it, to their own potential within it. Ethan tapped a control on the holo display, bringing up a detailed map of the galaxy. Here, near the core, he began, you'll find the richest reserves of valuable minerals and energy sources, but it's a deadly place. Intense radiation belts, frequent stellar flares, and volatile gravitational fields make it almost uninhabitable without the heaviest shielding. He swiped outward, and the view shifted to the spiral's outer rim. In contrast, the edge worlds are peaceful and stable. Radiation is minimal, and the climate is far more forgiving, but you'll pay the price in sparse resources and long travel times. He paused, letting the generals absorb the contrast. When we choose our new home, we cannot focus on raw material abundance alone. We must weigh habitability, potential hazards like local predators or hostile neighbors, and strategic considerations, proximity to trade routes, defensibility, all of it. General Zod leaned forward, eyes fixed on the shifting hologram. Beside him, General Fiora and the others wore expressions of hope tempered by anxiety. The fate of their people, perhaps of the entire race, hinged on this decision. Zod's voice was quiet but firm. We must find a world both safe and fertile, somewhere we can rebuild and thrive. Ethan saw the burden they carried and offered them a reassuring smile. I understand what's at stake, he said. Rest assured, I'll identify a system that meets every requirement. With a swift gesture, Ethan zoomed the map out. The individual sectors blurred away, replaced by a sweeping view of the Milky Way in its full, luminous glory. As the spiraled arms of their galaxy unfolded before them, the generals sat in tense silence, ready to follow Ethan wherever he would lead them. Ethan stared in awe as the observation deck's holoprojector painted the void before him. Countless stars winked into view, their brilliant lights dancing across the darkness. Nebulae bloomed in ghostly clouds of color. Black holes yawned like cosmic maws, and distant pulsars pulsed with silent rhythms. All at once, it felt as if they'd been transported onto the universe's grandest stage, able to witness its wonders firsthand. Without warning, the image shifted. The view pulled in rapidly along one of the Milky Way's spiral arms, closing the distance from the galaxy's rim toward its bright, bustling interior. Whenever a particularly striking star field appeared, some casting icy blue light, others burning in fiery reds, the projection lingered just long enough for everyone to take in its unique glow and heat. 5 minutes later, the sequence came to an abrupt halt. Dominating the display was a planet veined in mottled greens and reds, twice the size of Earth, Its surface was an intricate tapestry of soaring mountain ranges, meandering rivers, and vast, shimmering oceans. General Zod could barely contain his excitement. He rose from his seat and stepped forward, pressing his palm against the transparent console to examine every ridge and valley of this alien world in exquisite detail. Ethan joined him, pulse quickening at the thought of what mysteries this planet might hold. Chapter 676, The Hunt for a Habitable World. General Zod leaned forward, studying the holographic projection of the newly scanned planet. Its surface climate appeared temperate. Endless stretches of forest and grassland swayed under gentle breezes. A growing smile tugged at his lips. This was exactly the kind of world he'd been hoping to find. As the display zoomed in, additional data streamed across the console. Subsurface scans revealed rich mineral veins running through the crust, while sensors detected vast aquifers teeming with fresh water, indispensable resources for any future settlement. "We've really found a living planet," Fiora breathed, her voice brimming with excitement. She traced the planet's contours on the screen, her eyes alight with possibility. In her mind's eye, she already saw rolling meadows for cultivation, forests to be mapped and studied, and untold wonders waiting beneath alien skies. General Zod's pulse quickened. He turned to Ethan, their chief navigator and survey officer, his voice unsteady with anticipation. "Ethan, what are the coordinates of this world?" Ethan tapped a few commands into his console. The star map blinked, then slewed across the screen to reveal a cluster of distant suns. "Here," he said, pointing to a set of numbers that glowed in pale blue. "It sits on the outer edge of the Valara cluster, 3 light-years from our current position." Zod's excitement became palpable. "Plot a course," he ordered, eyes never leaving the display. "Prepare the fleet. We depart at once." Fiora exhaled, clutching the edge of the console. The promise of a new home, unspoiled, resource-rich, and teeming with life, had energized them all. As preparations began, each member of the crew felt the same thrilling certainty. They were on the verge of stepping onto a brand new world. Ethan met Batman's gaze as the Dark Knight quietly recorded the scene through his cowl's helmet camera. Turning to General Zod's question, he said evenly, "The coordinates for this planet are locked in." A ripple of excitement swept through the gathered Kryptonians. Just as they leaned forward, eager to learn their new home's location, Ethan drew in a breath and paused. "But," he lifted his head, seriousness settling into his eyes, "I don't believe this world is a suitable home for you." His words fell like a sudden frost, silencing the expectant crowd. Zod's brow shot up in surprise. "Why not? The planet appears perfect. Temperate climate, fertile soil, abundant minerals." Ethan didn't answer right away. With a few swift gestures, he enlarged the holographic image hovering between them. The projection sharpened, revealing sweeping emerald forests, an endless cobalt ocean, and sprawling cities teeming with life. Sleek spires and intricate domes lined wide boulevards where crowds of humanoid beings moved with purpose. He let the scene sink in, watching Zod's eyes widen at the sight of an advanced civilization already thriving there. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice steady. "Because there is already an intelligent species living on this world." General Zod frowned, and the other officers exchanged uneasy glances. None of them had expected this complication. Any world that has given rise to intelligent life and civilization is by default off-limits, he said. Ethan stepped forward. "We can't simply deny them the right to exist." Zod hesitated, then turned back to the display. "Carry on with the search." Ethan's voice rang out in the hushed command chamber as he manipulated the holographic projection of distant galaxies. Zod lingered at his shoulder, ready to argue, but before he could speak, the image of a promising planet began to contract, as though pulled inward by an invisible force. Zod exhaled and set aside his objections, at least for now. Though his expression didn't change, a faint trace of relief appeared between his brows. He inclined his head ever so slightly. Ethan had been truthful. According to his readings, they would indeed find a new world suitable for Kryptonian life. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself, then extended his enhanced senses into the depths of space. In the command room, murmurs rippled through the gathered Kryptonians. Finding a new world, one that could sustain their people, was a hope they all shared. On the large holoscreen, the starfield drifted by in silence. Every time Ethan paused his scan, a new signal appeared. Within the next half hour, the display halted to mark 9 planets capable of supporting life. Relief and excitement flickered across the crew's faces until the details came in. 8 of those worlds were already claimed by other civilizations. The 9th planet showed signs of habitation, but its ecosystems were collapsing. According to the readings, it would be uninhabitable in mere centuries. General Zod stood before the screen, arms crossed, his jaw tight. He stared at that dying world as if willing it back from the brink. Finally, he exhaled in frustration. "This won't do," he said, voice low but firm. Ethan nodded, suppressing his own disappointment. He adjusted his focus and swept the scan deeper into the nebula, into the vast, arching structure the crew referred to as the cantilever. There, the readings exploded with potential. Dozens of planets glimmered with the signatures of life. The command room fell silent for a moment, as if collectively holding its breath at the promise unfolding before them. They drifted past planet after planet, some lush and green, others blanketed in ice and snow, still others spasming with volcanic fire. Each world pulsed with life and energy, a vivid testament to the universe's boundless variety. The Kryptonian delegation stared in awe, humbled by the cosmos's scale and mystery. They had always believed their civilization to be mighty. Now, confronted by countless alien worlds, they finally grasped how small they truly were. But their wonder turned abruptly to shock. Before them, 2 living planets waged a desperate war. Armadas of starships swarmed through space, exchanging devastating salvos of lasers and missiles. Explosions blossomed in the void like deadly fireworks, and the roar of capital ships formed a grim, unending chorus. General Zod's brow furrowed as he watched the carnage unfold. He glanced at Ethan, the galaxy supervisor, and asked, his voice tight with concern, "You're not going to intervene?" Ethan met Zod's gaze evenly. "I'm honored to serve as the galaxy supervisor," he said, "but my authority doesn't extend to meddling in interplanetary conflicts." With that, he returned his attention to the standoff, his expression calm but resolute. The battle raged on, beyond their power to stop, yet another reminder of how vast and how untamed the universe could be. Ethan sat forward, his gaze steady. "My duty is to uphold interstellar peace and stability, and to prevent advanced civilizations like yours from obliterating entire worlds on a whim. As for conflicts among less developed societies, they're governed by their own rules and survival instincts." General Zod recoiled in surprise. He'd always assumed the galaxy supervisor held absolute authority over every star system. Ethan's words shattered that notion, revealing unexpected limits even on the supervisor's power. "Then why did you step in between Krypton and Earth?" Zod demanded, his voice edged with confusion. Ethan nodded once, thoughtfully. "Earth hasn't achieved interstellar status yet. There's an unwritten law in this universe. Once a civilization crosses into the interstellar era, other powers must not interfere in its wars. But for worlds still confined to their home system, those that haven't yet taken to the stars, we're permitted to shield them from the collateral damage of cosmic conflicts." Silence fell over Zod as he absorbed the explanation. He shook his head warily and turned back to the holographic projection of the battlefield, its fiery fronts and shattered cities a stark testament to the war's brutality. Confronted by such devastation, he found himself at a rare loss for words. Ethan had never imagined he could witness a cosmic war with such clarity. The sheer scale of the conflict deepened his awe of the galaxy supervisor's power, and at the same time drove home just how small and powerless he truly was. Chapter 6777, The Choice. Batman lingered at the edge of the cosmic battlefield, his cape billowing against the starlit void. Wonder Woman and Superman stood beside him, their faces pale with shock as torrents of galactic energy clashed all around them. Massive starships collided like meteors. Blinding beams of cosmic power cut through the darkness, reducing entire fleets to drifting debris. To Bruce Wayne, however, the spectacle held less terror than it did questions. While Diana and Clark reeled from the sheer scale of destruction, Batman's keen mind was already probing for the source, the hidden mechanism behind such unimaginable force. A cold dread settled over him as he realized this galactic overseer was no mere warlord, but a living embodiment of cosmic law, and that law was far more merciless than any earthly code. Nearby, Ethan calibrated his scanners, sweeping a vast spiral arm of the galaxy in search of habitable worlds. After painstaking analysis, he confirmed what the chaos of battle had almost obscured. This arm teemed with advanced civilizations. Countless star systems glowed like lanterns in the void, linked by bustling hyperspace lanes. Merchant liners, patrol frigates, and exploration craft wove through the lanes in an intricate, almost choreographed dance. Each society had forged its own destiny. Some had mastered translite travel, mapping the spiral arm's every nook and cranny. Others had built sprawling trade federations, their merchant guilds controlling entire star sectors. A third faction was defined by its war fleets, armadas bristling with planet-shattering weaponry. Despite their advances, however, none of these races had achieved true harmony. Trade treaties were as common as border skirmishes, alliances born one day and broken the next. Batman exchanged a glance with Ethan. In that silent moment, they both understood the truth. In a region so crowded with power and ambition, peace was always a fragile illusion, and the choice before them would determine whether it held or shattered forever. Across the galaxy, mighty civilizations wield vast fleets, cutting-edge technologies, and insatiable ambition. Through relentless conquest and plunder, they expand their domains and cement their power, often at the expense of interstellar stability. Smaller societies, no matter how unique their culture or how promising their innovations, find themselves forced into the shadows. With no hope of resisting on their own, they either swear fealty to a stronger power or cling to fragile alliances. Yet that dependence is a gamble. If their patron empire falls, they face extinction. Ethan knew this all too well when he thought of Krypton's fate. Before its downfall, Krypton had been respected among the stars, a civilization of proud cities, brilliant scholars, and abundant resources. Now, after the cataclysm that shattered their homeworld, fewer than 20 survivors remained. Scattered and nearly destitute, they possessed neither the manpower nor the means to defend themselves. In the vast, unsteady balance of galactic forces, the last remnants of Krypton teetered on the brink of oblivion. Ethan studied the star charts spread before him. If the Kryptonians were to settle in this sector, they'd risk immediate conflict, either being overrun by rival civilizations or dragged into perpetual wars, their development stunted from the start. General Zod had reached the same conclusion. This region was untenable. So Ethan shifted his focus to the next galactic cantilever further inward. At first glance, its framework resembled the previous one, but closer analysis revealed critical differences. Along the outer edge, only a handful of planets showed any signs of life, and most of those were already claimed by other powers. Yet these were fledgling civilizations, barely organized and far weaker than any major interstellar empire. Their governments lacked the stability needed to enforce order, making them unreliable neighbors at best. As for the truly unclaimed worlds, they proved even less hospitable. Some lay on the brink of annihilation, destined to be consumed by nearby supernovas or swallowed by drifting black holes. Others were newborn planets, their surfaces still molten, choked with volcanic ash and blazing rivers of magma. Such harsh conditions fell far short of the requirements for Kryptonian survival and growth. Ethan leaned back, deep in thought. If his people were to thrive again, they would need a more promising corner of the galaxy, one where peace, resources, and stability offered a real chance at rebuilding. Only then could the ideals of Krypton endure. Ethan leaned deeper into the simulation, shifting his viewpoint toward the cantilever's central region, and what he saw took his breath away. As he zoomed in, the empty expanse gave way to a dense cluster of life-bearing worlds, each suspended like jewels against the velvet of space. Here, planets of every hue and climate floated in a staggered formation. Sapphire and emerald spheres, so clear they might have been carved from jade, icebound giants draped in sheets of glittering frost, and blistering lava worlds, their volcanoes spouting rivers of molten rock into the void. Each world boasted a livable temperature, rich natural resources, and a remarkably stable environment, ideal conditions for life to flourish. But even more astonishing was the discovery of multiple interstellar civilizations thriving among these planets. In the virtual control room's panoramic display, the cantilever's stars coalesced into a dazzling cosmic mural, alive with the glow of countless settlements and spaceways. Unlike the fractured societies Ethan had observed elsewhere on the structure, these cultures were only beginning to make contact. No wars had been fought, no treaties broken, only eager diplomats and cautious scholars extending the first tentative greetings. For the Kryptonians monitoring this scene, it was a spark of hope, proof that peace and cooperation might yet prevail in the darkest reaches of the galaxy. Scores of life-bearing worlds hung like pearls across the starfield, each with its own unique ecosystem and path of civilization. Yet despite the countless planets that had nurtured sentient life, almost none had truly stepped onto the cosmic stage. Those few who had barely scratched the surface of interstellar travel remained confined to their home systems. In the control room of Krypton's flagship, exhilaration rippled through the crew like a rising tide. Holographic projections of distant, life-friendly planets hovered in midair, spinning slowly as survey data streamed around them. Among the officers, Lieutenant Ethan stood with his jaw clenched, eyes bright with anticipation. Every soldier in the room knew this moment would determine the future of their world. At the heart of the display, General Zod reached out and guided the holosphere's rotation. His gaze swept deliberately from one planet to the next, his expression alight with the promise of rebirth. To Ethan, it seemed as though Zod could already envision a thriving Krypton, new and vibrant on the perfect world. But even the general understood that their choice carried immense weight. Finding a planet capable of sustaining an entire civilization would be no simple task. Ethan flicked through the star charts projected across the command deck, his gaze sharp. They needed a world rich in resources, a stable ecosystem, and above all, unclaimed by any rival superpower. With a few practice swipes, he zeroed in on a cluster of life-bearing planets and froze the holomap. "Here," he said, turning to face General Zod. "Pick your planet." Zod's voice cracked with disbelief. "You're really letting us choose?" His armored shoulders hunched as if bracing for a trick. "All of it. For us?" Ethan's lips curved into a confident smile. "The entire galaxy answers to my command. What I grant, I can withdraw, but the choice is yours. Every world has its own bounty and its own dangers. Choose wisely." At Ethan's assurance, Zod's doubts vanished. This was no idle promise. He felt the weight behind Ethan's words. Stray, tending his spine, the general studied the frozen star cluster, already plotting which planet would become the new cradle for their people. General Zod sat before the holographic display, his gaze sweeping across every potentially habitable world. He methodically reviewed each planet's fundamental measurements: diameter, mass, rotation rate, orbital path, while cross-referencing data on climate patterns, ecosystems, and resource deposits. His mission was clear: find a world where Kryptonians could flourish without igniting conflict with an existing civilization. Yet the search was far from simple. Planets teeming with minerals and fertile soil often suffered extremes of temperature or deadly storms that no colony could endure. Others featured mild, inviting climates but lacked the essential resources to sustain Kryptonian industry and population. Each prospect carried its own fatal flaw, forcing Zod to weigh every variable with ruthless precision. Chapter 678. New Planet Batman's cowl-mounted camera whirred as it recorded every detail, transmitting precious data back to the Batcave, intelligence he would never have been able to gather under normal circumstances. He had to know which world General Zod had chosen as the new cradle for Krypton, and he needed this footage to guard against any future return of Zod and his followers. Sweeping across the unprotected expanse of the Milky Way, the feed unleashed a flood of information into Batman's mind. The galaxy's enormity, countless stars, planets, and distant galaxies made his heart race. Each world bore its own life and civilization, some thriving in peace, others crumbling into ruin, many locked in bitter conflict, and a few flourishing through cooperation. It was a cosmic epic laid bare before him. Yet behind the spectacle lay hidden dangers. In this vast universe, Earth was no more than a speck of dust, vulnerable to invasion by civilizations beyond imagining. And down on his home planet, humanity remained blissfully unaware, lost in its own concerns and utterly unprepared for the threats looming in the stars. Ethan, the galactic overseer, had deliberately kept the details of Earth's branch of the Cantilever Nexus under wraps. Had he been more forthcoming, Batman would have learned at once that alien civilizations could, in theory, mountain invasion of our planet. As it stood, Batman's recent voyage among the stars had already expanded his horizons immeasurably. He'd gazed in awe at those brilliant stellar fields and felt the vastness of space pressing in around him. But old habits die hard. Once more, Batman's ever-present caution reared its head. Despite Ethan's reassurances that Earth lay protected under the Overseer's watchful eye, Batman couldn't shake the nagging fear of extraterrestrial aggression. He knew better than most that in this universe, nothing is ever guaranteed. Promises, even those made by cosmic authorities, can vanish in an instant. And though Earth may seem insignificant in the grand tapestry of the Milky Way, its obscurity offers no real safety. The universe is filled with marvels and dangers. Among the countless civilizations scattered across countless worlds, there are bound to be some with ambitions of conquest. What if Earth, in its quiet corner, caught the eye of a ruthless empire searching for new territories? Batman refused to wait and see. From this moment on, he would no longer be a mere observer. The fate of Earth was too important, and it was a responsibility he was determined to embrace. Ethan stood alone in the cavernous Batcave, the glow of computer screens reflecting off his armored cowl. He'd been running worst-case scenarios all night, Earth under siege from a technologically superior alien armada. It was no longer enough to rely on his own skills, his current arsenal, or even the Justice League's standard protocols. He needed a failsafe, a defensive blueprint that could repel anything an extraterrestrial force might unleash. Leaning over the central console, Ethan scrolled through schematics for what he now called the anti-alien suit. Each prototype had to meet 3 critical criteria. First, impenetrable shielding against energy weapons, from plasma cannons to particle beams. Second, an advanced sensor array, thermal scanning, long-range radar, electromagnetic anomaly detection, so no alien strike could take them by surprise. And third, integrated countermeasures, deployable drones, built-in missile interceptors, and a high-power pulse emitter for disabling enemy technology in close quarters. He tapped a few commands, watching the design refine itself in real time. But even the smartest suit in the world wouldn't matter if he faced these invaders alone. Ethan pressed his gloved fingers to his temple, considering Earth's champions. Wonder Woman's combat prowess and indomitable will could turn the tide in any ground engagement. Clark Kent, Superman, had aerial superiority, raw strength, and the ability to deflect cosmic attacks with his invulnerable form. Their combined talents, joined with this new technology, might just give humanity a fighting chance. Firm resolve settling in his chest, Ethan rose and strode through the maze of platforms and suspension cables that crisscrossed the cave. He found Diana Prince examining ancient Atlantean relics on a nearby work table, her expression respectful but alert at his approach. Clark hovered a few feet above the ground, scanning incoming threat-level data on his wrist device. "Diana, Clark," Ethan began, voice steady. "I've been planning for an invasion scenario, one where we can't rely on surprise or outdated contingencies. I've drafted designs for specialized suits and a broader defense network, but I can't implement it alone. I need your help to develop, field test, and deploy these systems worldwide. Will you stand with me on this?" Wonder Woman exchanged a determined glance with Superman, then nodded. Clark landed softly beside her and folded his arms in agreement. Together, they would forge Earth's greatest line of defense. One suit, one operation, and one united front at a time. Ethan stood before Wonder Woman and Superman in the Watchtower's strategy room, his expression grave. "Alien civilizations may pose an existential threat to Earth," he told them. "If we're to protect humanity, we must pool our strengths and build a truly comprehensive defense network." Diana and Clark exchanged a solemn glance. They both understood the burden of safeguarding an entire planet, and that no one, no matter how powerful, could face the unknown alone. With a shared nod, they pledged to integrate their abilities into Batman's broader contingency plan, uniting their efforts for the sake of Earth's future. Half a galaxy away, General Zod's expedition had narrowed the hunt for a new Kryptonian home to a handful of worlds. Dozens of planets had passed the first test: climate, atmosphere, water supply, but Krypton's survivors required far more than mere habitability. Zod's scientific council examined geological stability, ecosystem maturity, and any environmental hazards that might threaten Kryptonian physiology. After exhaustive scans and on-site probes, they pinpointed a young planet teeming with the first stirrings of life. Its unspoiled landscapes and stable core promised a fresh start, a place where Krypton's legacy could flourish anew. Chapter 3. Ethan stood on the observation deck, eyes fixed on the hollow projector hovering before him. The planet, still unnamed by most survey teams, spun slowly on its axis, bathed in the warm glow of its home star, Terra. From this vantage point, it was immediately clear why everyone was so excited. The world lay squarely within the star's habitable zone. Temperatures were mild, the sunlight plentiful, and conditions ripe for life. But it was the atmosphere that truly captivated Ethan and his fellow scientists. Spectral readings revealed a mix of gases that almost perfectly mirrored Krypton's own air. Nitrogen made up roughly 78%, ideal for maintaining a stable surface pressure, while about 21% oxygen provided abundant breathability. Traces of argon, carbon dioxide, and water vapor rounded out the blend, ensuring not only respiration, but also the water cycle essential to any thriving ecosystem. Ethan tapped a command, zooming in on the magnetic flux lines surrounding the planet. "The magnetic field is strong," he murmured. "It will shield the surface from charged particles and solar winds, just as Earth's magnetosphere protects us. That means any explorers, especially our Kryptonian friends, won't be bombarded by cosmic radiation." He switched views to the ultraviolet filtration overlay. The dense atmosphere absorbed and scattered the majority of harmful UV rays, creating a sunscreen of sorts for whatever life might have already taken hold. "Put it all together," Ethan said, looking up at Commander Hayes, "and you've got a world whose temperature, pressure, and radiation levels are well within the comfort zone of Kryptonian physiology. This isn't just another rock in space. It could be a second me." Commander Hayes nodded, her face lit by the holographic glow. "Prepare the landing team, Dr. Morgan. If the rest of our data checks out, we'll move forward with the first contact mission." Ethan allowed himself a small smile. After years of searching the galaxy for a planet that could support not only human life, but the unique needs of their Kryptonian allies, they might finally have found it. Terra's new world wasn't just habitable, it was hospitable, and for the first time, it felt like the future had truly begun. Ethan reviewed the planetary survey one last time. This world's twin defenses, a dense, radiation-absorbing atmosphere, coupled with a powerful magnetosphere, would shield the colonists from cosmic hazards, creating a sanctuary where Kryptonian life could flourish. Even more compelling was its gravity, over 5 times that of Earth. Such crushing force would stabilize the crust, quelling earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, and forging an unshakable stronghold for their people. No sooner had the Planetary Commission granted its approval than General Zod sprang into action. He dispatched advance teams to scout landing zones, establish forward bases, and prepare terraforming arrays. Every officer understood the stakes. Converting a distant orb into a thriving Kryptonian home demanded nothing less than flawless planning and execution. "Supervisor," Zod declared, his tone brooking no opposition, "we have chosen this planet." Ethan met his commander's gaze and offered a single confident nod. The supervisor, a figure of unwavering authority, leaned forward, folding his arms. "Have you considered this carefully? Once our selection is ratified by the High Council, there will be no turning back." The hum of the starship's engines filled the pause that followed. Outside the reinforced viewport, the planet loomed, untamed, promising, and now irrevocably bound to their destiny. Chapter 679, New Krypton. The choice is made. General Zod's reply was as unwavering as ever. "Then we go." Ethan offered no further words, only a slight lift of his hand. In an instant, a soft, iridescent glow enveloped Zod, his crack troops, their sleek starship, and the massive planet-transforming apparatus. When the light faded, they stood together again, this time hovering in the void above their destination world. Shock rippled through Zod's ranks. They had expected nothing more than coordinates, perhaps an escort. Not a miraculous teleportation of men, machines, and an entire vessel across the expanse of space. Even Zod, a general famed for his iron nerve, blinked in disbelief. But it was a reminder. As overseer of the galaxy, Ethan possessed powers far beyond mortal ken. Back on the orbital platform where Batman and the others watched, silence reigned. One moment, Zod's forces stood on the landing pad. The next, they and their ship had vanished. No warning, no parting words, only the eerie emptiness of the observation window. Finally, Batman broke the quiet. They're gone. The heroes exchanged looks. There was nothing left to do here. Each gathered their belongings and prepared to depart, heading back to their homes, to loved ones, and for many, to the comforting embrace of their mothers. In the face of such sudden farewells, family was the only refuge that remained. They were ready to put Batman's plan into action, make contact with Clark and Diana before the Justice League arrived in full force. General Zod's flagship had been instantly caught by the planet's immense gravitational field, spiraling it into a steady orbit. Rather than touch down immediately, Zod chose to send an advanced team of geologists, biologists, and engineers down to the surface for a thorough on-site survey. Their assignment was formidable: compile detailed data on the planet's geology, from rock formations to mineral deposits. Equipped with cutting-edge drilling rigs and seismic wave detectors, the specialists bored deep into the crust. After weeks of painstaking work, they made a crucial discovery. The planet's core had ceased its convective heat motion and entered a long period of geological stability. In practical terms, earthquakes and volcanic eruptions would be extremely rare, precisely the kind of secure environment Kryptonians would need for a permanent settlement. Meanwhile, the advanced team made a series of remarkable discoveries. Scanning the planet's crust, they identified abundant deposits of rare minerals, rare earth elements, precious metals, and energy-rich ores that could prove vital to the Kryptonian colonization effort. Meticulous surveys mapped both the distribution and estimated reserves of these deposits, laying the groundwork for future extraction and processing. Equally encouraging were their findings on the planet's nascent biosphere. The team detected simple life forms, algae mats clinging to rocky outcrops, and resilient microorganisms thriving in high-gravity pools. Remarkably, these organisms carry out photosynthesis, generating oxygen and other byproducts that help stabilize the local atmosphere. Their presence suggests the planet's ecology is already moving toward a balanced, self-sustaining system, an ideal precursor to full settlement. Over several weeks, researchers conducted in-depth analyses of these life forms, documenting their habitats, reproductive cycles, and feeding behaviors. This data will be crucial in understanding how imported Kryptonian species might integrate into the planet's emerging ecosystem, ensuring a harmonious and sustainable colony. Ethan's reconnaissance team returned with a trove of data that would prove vital for establishing a Kryptonian ecosystem on the new world. Their climate survey, in particular, yielded encouraging results. This planet experiences 4 distinct seasons, enjoys ample sunlight, and receives just the right amount of rainfall to support robust plant life. Such conditions not only promise a rich tapestry of biodiversity, but also lay the groundwork for Kryptonian agriculture. Using state-of-the-art meteorological sensors and advanced data analysis systems, Ethan and his colleagues conducted months of continuous monitoring. They tracked temperature fluctuations, precipitation patterns, and solar radiation levels, building a comprehensive picture of the planet's environmental rhythms. With each passing day, their confidence grew that this world could sustain and even flourish under Kryptonian stewardship. Once their analyses were complete, the team compiled a detailed report and dispatched it to General Zod. Upon reviewing the findings, Zod immediately greenlit the Planetary Transformation Initiative. With the strategic go-ahead secured, preparations for terraforming and settlement could now proceed in earnest. The dream of a new Krypton had taken its first decisive step from theory to reality. They deployed cutting-edge science and technology to tailor the planet's atmosphere, climate, and geology for Kryptonian life. First, they overhauled the air itself. Using specialized catalysts and nanoscale filters, they scrubbed out toxic gases and pollutants while boosting the levels of oxygen and nitrogen. The result was an atmosphere almost indistinguishable from Krypton's, vital for the fragile physiology of any Kryptonian who might breathe it. Next came climate control. By combining advanced weather management systems with high-efficiency energy converters, they calibrated sunshine, temperature, and rainfall with surgical precision. Broad swaths of land received just enough extra light to spur rapid plant growth, while carefully modulated precipitation patterns ensured soil moisture stayed within ideal ranges. To keep everything on track, a planet-wide monitoring network ran continuous assessments of weather data, adjusting atmospheric parameters in real time. Finally, they tackled the planet's interior. Seismic wave emitters and energy field generators reshaped tectonic stresses, smoothing out unstable fault lines and promoting the slow uplift of new mountain ranges. Over months of fine-tuning, they transformed the raw, unpredictable terrain into a stable, life-supporting world, one ready to host a lost race yearning for a new home. Ethan stood on the scarred plains of New Krypton, watching the colossal terraforming engine thunder to life behind him. Its reactors glowed with a fierce, crimson light as it reshaped the planet's crust, stabilizing tectonic plates, dampening volcanic activity, and muting seismic tremors. In a matter of hours, the world beneath his feet would be strong enough to support vast Kryptonian cities. General Zod, arms folded and expression unreadable, stood just behind Ethan. The general's presence snapped Ethan to attention. He adopted the crisp posture of a soldier awaiting orders. But beneath Zod's steely discipline lay a deeper purpose. This effort was more than military conquest. It was a bid for coexistence. All around them, engineers and ecologists worked side by side. Using advanced alloys and nanocomposite materials, they reinforced mountain ranges and filled deep-sea trenches. At the same time, specialized biologists monitored every alteration to the native flora and fauna. Wherever possible, they rerouted their industrial processes to spare endangered ecosystems, ensuring that New Krypton's original life forms would survive alongside their new Kryptonian settlers. "We'll have to be patient," Zod said quietly, leaning closer. "The planet's biosphere is fragile. Any misstep could set us back years." Ethan nodded, shifting his weight as the ground beneath them hummed with shifting gravity fields. The machine's energy output was already rewriting the planet's mass distribution, subtly tweaking gravity so that Kryptonians, accustomed to their homeworld's heavier pull, could walk comfortably under starlight. "All systems green," reported a voice over Ethan's comlink. "Atmospheric regulators are online, terraforming matrix at 97%. A low roar rose from the engine as it surged into its final phase. Ethan felt a tremor in the ear, as though the planet itself were exhaling. In that moment, he understood the true cost of this project, not just in resources or manpower, but in responsibility. New Krypton could not simply be stamped with the footprint of an imperial race. It had to be nurtured into a shared world. General Zod's gaze swept across the horizon, where half-constructed domes and spires glittered under the alien sun. "Our service to the Galactic Overseer has brought us here," he said. "But our service to New Krypton must come first, ecologically, socially, and spiritually. Only then will our civilization thrive in harmony with this world." Ethan exhaled slowly. He had joined this mission to ensure a future for his people. Now he realized that future depended on treating New Krypton not as a prize to be claimed, but as a partner to be honored. Around them, the planet's new surface settled into place, and a promise of balance and of possibility took root beneath the twin skies. Ethan, overseer of the galaxy, sat across from General Zod in the cold steel briefing room. The low hum of the flagship's engines filled the silence until Zod broke in, frustration sharpening his tone. "Supervisor," Zod began, leaning forward, "why didn't you bring Kal-El with you? We need the code of life encoded in his DNA to restore Krypton's population." Ethan regarded him with calm detachment. "It isn't necessary," he replied evenly. "Kryptonians are capable of natural reproduction. Your society's collapse sprang from over-reliance on technology and rigid hierarchies, mistakes I refuse to repeat." Zod's dark eyes narrowed. "My scientific advisors warn that without the code, natural birth among our fewer than 20 survivors will result in severe genetic defects and a rapid decline of the species." Ethan tapped his fingers on the table. "I understand the risk," he said quietly. "But depending on a single genetic template is exactly what created Krypton's caste system and ultimately led to its destruction. True recovery must come from diversity, not cloning one ideal." Silence fell as Zod studied Ethan's expression. The distant stars glinted through the viewport, a reminder that the fate of an entire civilization hinged on their next decision. Chapter 6 and 80, Photosynthetic Reaction. Fewer than 20 Kryptonians remained in the colony, and the elders were growing alarmed. With such a small gene pool, each new birth carried the risk of congenital malformations, hidden recessive disorders, or even crippling genetic diseases. Genetic drift threatened to erode essential DNA functions, and the specter of inbreeding, inevitable in a population this sparse, only heightened the danger. As one of the colony's leading scientists warned, if we don't find a solution soon, our next generation could be born with irreparable defects. Ethan listened quietly as the council detailed their fears. He understood better than anyone how fragile a civilization could become when DNA diversity falters. His own Kryptonian physiology gave him an uncanny ability to heal and adapt, but he knew most of his people couldn't replicate that gift. Instead of offering vague promises, Ethan reached into his lab coat and produced a vial of pale, iridescent liquid. "This is the gene repair serum," he announced. "Think of it as a genetic patch. Once injected into a newborn, it hunts down faulty sequences and corrects them at the molecular level." Skeptical faces watched as he demonstrated the process on a recently delivered infant. With a gentle nod from the medical officer, Ethan administered a single dose into the baby's thigh. Almost immediately, nanoscopic repair agents dispersed through the bloodstream, scanning for anomalies. Within minutes, the colony's geneticists confirmed that every previously identified risk factor had been neutralized. No missing genes, no chromosomal breaks, no lurking recessive mutations. The infant cooed, perfectly healthy and whole. Relief swept through the room. By applying Ethan's serum to each newborn, the Kryptonians had finally quelled the threat posed by their dwindling numbers. With their genetic integrity secured, they could now focus on rebuilding their civilization under Earth's sun, and perhaps in time, unlock the mysteries of photosynthetic energy the planet offered. For the first time in generations, hope felt within reach. Ethan spoke calmly. "We developed this gene repair agent to protect endangered species throughout the universe." General Zod's brows shot up. "That actually exists?" "Essentially, it's an advanced form of gene editing. Think CRISPR-Cas9, but optimized for precision and delivery. The agent carries both the guide RNA and the Cas9 enzyme, allowing it to seek out and correct specific mutations in a genome." A ripple of unease went through the Kryptonian delegation. Their scientific community was formidable, but they had never mastered genetics to this degree. That was precisely why they journeyed here, to enlist Carl I's help. Ethan continued, "In theory, you could harvest DNA from preserved Kryptonian remains at other outposts, reconstruct the target genes, and then perform in vitro fertilization. But without Carl I's computational algorithms and fine-tuned protocols, you'd have no reliable way to pinpoint and correct individual nucleotide errors. You'd essentially be working blind." General Zod steepled his fingers, considering. "So the success of this gene repair agent hinges on a combination of harvested genetic material and Carl I's proprietary editing platform." "Exactly," Ethan confirmed. "With his software guiding the CRISPR machinery, you can zero in on a single defective base among billions. Even a civilization famed for its intellect and unmatched powers of memory needs specialized expertise for that level of precision." A thoughtful silence settled over the chamber. For all their brilliance, the Kryptonians had to admit that sometimes outside help was indispensable. Ethan explained the therapy's threefold approach. First, the agents deliver molecules, like antisense RNA, that specifically silence harmful genes, while simultaneously supplying healthy gene sequences to compensate for any defective ones. Second, by modifying epigenetic markers, for example, reshaping chromatin structure or adjusting DNA methylation, these compounds can fine-tune gene expression and correct genetic abnormalities without ever altering the underlying DNA code. Finally, the formulation includes bioactive ingredients that actively promote cell regeneration and tissue repair, accelerating the body's own healing processes. These ingredients can accelerate the recovery or replacement of damaged cells, indirectly correcting genetic defects. They also contain immune-boosting compounds that help the body fend off diseases rooted in those defects. Our precision delivery system makes sure repair molecules, or even complete strands of genetic instructions, reach their exact target cells or tissues. And by combining gene therapy, which edits DNA directly, with cell therapy, which replaces damaged cells with healthy ones, we address genetic disorders from every angle. The Kryptonians had no idea the treasure they'd received, a multifunctional gene repair serum coveted by civilizations across the galaxy. Now Ethan had handed them cartloads of it, practically giving it away like fresh produce. From here on, all they had to do was ensure the healthy birth of future generations. That, Ethan added, is part of your initial investment. Bear in mind, these gene repair agents don't come cheap. General Zod bowed his head. Understood, Lord Inspector. They're soft-spoken and ill-equipped to take advantage of anyone, so General Zod reasons there's nothing Ethan could possibly desire from them. After all, this is a civilization on the brink of extinction. Fewer than 20 survivors remain. What could they possibly offer? If anything, their weakness only strengthens Zod's determination to serve Ethan more faithfully. Ethan stands on the observation deck of the Kryptonian starship, eyes fixed on the center of the Terra system. Before him blazes a young yellow sun, larger and more vigorous than Earth's own star, its brilliant rays like a furnace flame illuminating the void. Below him, Zod and the rest of the crew have just finished reconfiguring the planet's gravity field. As they shed their cumbersome armor and step onto the deck, the full force of Terra's sunlight strikes them, and an unfamiliar agony sears through their bodies. What's happening? Zod murmurs, voice tight with alarm. His brows draw together as confusion and panic flicker in his eyes. It feels as if his senses have been dialed up to infinity. Distant noises roar like tidal waves. Every footstep, every breath seems to pound in his ears. Ethan's vision flared with something entirely new. It wasn't just enhanced sight. He seemed to peer through every barrier of reality, past the surfaces of objects, through the layers of his own flesh and blood, right down to the pale, intricate lattice of bone beneath his skin. General. Fiora's shout cut through the charged air. The moment Ethan's power surged, a wave of sensory distortion rippled outward. Fiora's legs gave out beneath her, and she collapsed, stunned by the intensity. All around them, Kryptonians reeled, hands clapped over ears, eyes squeezed shut, each desperately trying to block the onslaught of stimulus flooding their heightened senses. Life on Krypton had honed them for extremes. Under 10 times Earth's gravity, Kryptonians built muscles and bones far stronger and more resilient than any humans. Their eyes, ears, even subtle senses were sharpened to a blade's edge, able to detect minute changes invisible to ordinary beings. Yet now that very acuity only magnified their agony. And fueling it all was the unique, quasi-photosynthetic energy system woven into every Kryptonian cell, an internal converter that drew on their planet's yellow sun to generate astonishing power. Today that power had found a new conduit in Ethan, and everyone present was feeling its unnerving breadth for the very first time. Ethan watched in awe as the Kryptonians stood beneath Terra's yellow sun, their bodies drinking in its rays. Back on Krypton, under a red star, they could barely sustain basic life functions. Here, under this golden light, they absorbed energy so powerfully, their strength surged beyond any normal limit. Yet even their mighty abilities weren't infinite. To remain superhuman, they had to continuously store solar energy, and only yellow stars like Terra's could supply it. As the sun's warm, brilliant beams danced across their skin, Ethan felt the tremors of raw power, and the weight of incredible pressure radiating from them. It was the first time he'd ever witnessed a Kryptonian's dramatic response to sunlight. Each figure shimmered as though wrapped in a ribbon of molten gold, their flesh glowing with a faint, radiant luster. Chapter 681, The Awakening of the Kryptonians. Kryptonians are a race from a distant galaxy, and their physiology is unlike anything on Earth. Their bodies function as highly efficient energy converters, able to absorb sunlight and transform it directly into the bioenergy they need. The moment a Kryptonian steps into the sun's rays, the deepest genetic mechanisms within him are triggered. These ancient guardian genes, dormant since birth, suddenly spring to life, sensing solar radiation and orchestrating a cascade of biochemical reactions. First, sunlight signals race through the cells to the ribosomes, the tiny protein factories. There, they begin assembling unique solar proteins, specialized molecules that serve as both the engines of cellular activity and the vital link between sunlight and metabolic function. Once formed, these solar proteins are shuttled to the cell membrane, where an even greater marvel unfolds. The cell's phospholipid bilayer, a flexible, double-layered shield of fats, wraps around these proteins and the embedded sugars, transforming itself into a dynamic living barrier. This newly energized membrane regulates massive flows of ions and nutrients, effectively converting raw solar power into every pulse of Kryptonian metabolism. In a matter of moments, what was once inert potential has become the furious heartbeat of a superpowered being. Across the planet, Kryptonians everywhere feel the same surge. They are awake at last. Ethan watched as sunlight struck the barrier, setting off a surge of energy that rippled through it like an electric current. In an instant, the entire structure seemed alive, each cell lighting up in rapid succession, the flow of power precise and unerringly efficient, as though driven by a masterfully engineered circuit. Almost at once, the cell's internal machinery kicked into overdrive. Mitochondria, the tiny power plants within, ramped up their respiration, churning out ATP at a furious pace to fuel whatever demands lay ahead. Nearby, the endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus joined the fray, shuttling proteins, lipids, and critical signals with clockwork accuracy. Together, these organelles kept every biochemical reaction on track, coordinating an invisible ballet of molecular assembly and dispatch. In the cytoplasm, the vacuoles stole the show. Ethan saw them swell and writhe under the sun's influence, their contents, an array of ions and organic compounds, roiling so intensely that they seemed to glow with heat. Each bubble and flash added to the impression of a living system in full surge, transformed by sunlight into a blazing, breathing engine of life. Ethan felt the currents of electrons in his vacuoles surge, driving their concentration upward by more than tenfold. This furious flow didn't just flood Kryptonian cells with raw energy, it also underpinned their unique mastery of a body-wide biomagnetic field. Waves of electrons moving through the cytoplasm feed back into a vast, controlled network, enabling Kryptonians to perceive and manipulate magnetic forces around them with pinpoint accuracy. They can telekinetically guide objects, gauge distances and directions, and even unleash devastating energy waves. What we call heat vision, freezing breath, or steel-hard skin are all specialized expressions of this biomagnetic field. When a Kryptonian concentrates on generating heat, they adjust the electron's motion to emit intense photons, the blazing beams we know as heat vision. To freeze their surroundings, they reverse the field's polarity, projecting a blast of frigid energy as chilling breath. And when they need nigh-impenetrable durability, they stiffen the biomagnetic lattice until their flesh approaches living steel. Yet even these awe-inspiring abilities represent only the beginning of what a Kryptonian can achieve. Ethan could feel it the moment the sunlight struck his skin, a surge of power flowing inward, reaching every corner of his Kryptonian body. First, the light passed through his cell membranes, each one acting like a translucent shield that forward-ed the photons deeper into the cell. Then it passed into the cytoplasm, where chlorophyll-like absorption factors, emerald gleaming in his green-tinged blood, captured and concentrated the solar energy. From there, the energy traveled through a cascade of microscopic processes, the breakdown and reconstruction fluids, the protoplasm's fluid network, each step refining and directing the power until finally it reached the cell nucleus, the true control center of his cells. Within that nucleus lay the genetic blueprint of Kryptonian life, his own DNA coiled into chromosomes awaiting activation. Under the sun's unrelenting stimulus, the cytoskeletal filaments inside the nucleus came alive. Like high-speed data channels, they began to pulse with light-borne energy, transmitting instructions and fuel throughout the genetic core. Ethan could almost sense the hum of information racing along these filaments, signaling the start of an extraordinary transformation. Then, with quiet precision, the chromosomes started to separate. It was the first step of cell division, a process that would regenerate and strengthen him. As each chromosome duplicated and moved apart, a wave of renewal swept through every tissue in his body. Under Earth's sun, Ethan's Kryptonian cells were not merely surviving, they were evolving, rebuilding him from the inside out with every new division. In that moment, Ethan knew he was becoming more than human, more than Kryptonian. He was a living solar engine, reborn under the light of a distant star. Under the yellow sun's energy, the DNA nestled in each cell's nucleus springs into action, replicating and recombining to provide the genetic blueprint for division and specialization. Once the first sun-charged cell completes mitosis, it sets off a cascade. Daughter cells multiply rapidly, then begin to diverge in shape, structure, and function. This is cell differentiation, the very foundation of an organism's growth and maturation. In Kryptonians, this process operates with extraordinary speed and precision. As the newly divided cells mature, they branch into distinct tissue types: muscle, nerve, epithelial, and more. In turn, these tissues assemble in a highly ordered fashion to form organs such as the heart, liver, and brain. Through seamless coordination, these organs establish a remarkably efficient biological system. It is precisely this super-efficient sequence of division and differentiation that underlies Kryptonian abilities. Their muscle tissue, for instance, develops ultra-dense fiber bundles far beyond human norms, granting them phenomenal strength and explosive speed. Likewise, their nerve tissue's accelerated specialization yields reaction times and coordination that verge on precognition. In every cell, Kryptonians carry the seeds of their legendary powers. Ethan felt a faint electric hum beneath his skin, the subtle ripple of his own biomagnetic field interacting with Earth's. As a Kryptonian, his nerve tissues were extraordinarily developed, able to detect the slightest shifts in magnetic forces and even direct that energy through his body. His liver operated like a biochemical furnace, instantly synthesizing and breaking down complex molecules to fuel his remarkable healing and adaptability. Beneath the yellow sun, every one of his cells grew tougher. Their walls crystallized into something almost as hard as iron, able to withstand crushing impacts and enormous pressures. And should damage occur, his cells regenerated in seconds, erasing wounds that would be fatal to any ordinary being. But super strength and rapid recovery were only part of his gift. His vision pierced the faintest glimmers of light across vast distances, and his hearing picked up the faintest whisper carried on the wind. Both senses sprang from that same union of solar radiation, cellular structure, and biomagnetic energy. We could unpack the science behind each ability for days, but in reality, all of it happens in an instant. General Zod and his troops are all military-trained Kryptonians, and their capacity to adapt far outstrips Clark's. After all, Clark is a naturally born Kryptonian, not a battle-hardened soldier. In particular, General Zod never lost control of his body throughout the entire process. Even when the sudden surge in sensory input threatened his balance, he never wavered. Instead, he mastered his enhanced abilities almost immediately. Fiora and her men, by contrast, lagged behind. It took them nearly half an hour to regain their footing.